order. The time is approximately 9:30 in the morning, and the date is May 17th, 2022, Tuesday. And this is one of our budget sessions for the constitutional officers and court support. Some minor changes and announcements. First of all, if you do have any electronic devices that make noise, please put them on silent or shut them off. That way we'll have limited interruptions. Tax collector is not on the agenda. He has a conflict today, but if we feel that we need to hear his presentation, that can be scheduled in June. Also, Florida Department of Health, Donna Walsh, she can only make this morning's time frame, so if we go past this morning, we'll reschedule her automatically until June, if there's no objections to that. We do have public comments in the afternoon, but after each constitutionals, I'll be asking the public, because there is one requester ready to speak, to have any comments after each constitutional. That way we can try to speed that up as well. I would like to ask everyone to stand, and I'd like to ask David Johnson to lead us in the pledge. David?
Thank you. If you'll please join me in a pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Before we go into the constitutionals, officers, I would like to ask our county manager if he has any comments before he turns it over to his staff.
Well, first, I want to thank our staff and the staff of all our constitutional officers for being here today and the work that they've done up to this point, and especially the work that Tricia Johnson has done. And rather than take any other more time, I'm going to turn it right over to Tricia.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. For the record, Tricia Johnson, Deputy County Manager. Today is our first of 3 to 4 budget work sessions in the fiscal year 2023 budget development process. Today we will hear from 4 of our constitutional officers, Florida Department of Health, and court support programs. We are in the process of finalizing our FY23 County Manager's budget, which will be delivered to you by June 15th. Briefings to prepare for our next budget work session, which is scheduled on June 21st, will commence on June 13th, and I believe those have already been scheduled through your office. With that, I will turn this over to our property appraiser, David Johnson, to present his budget.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thanks for having us today, and always fun to be back with you and give you a little idea about what our next year looks like from a fiscal standpoint as far as running the office goes, and some maybe a little bit of a preview. You've had a preview about what the tax roll is doing, but we certainly are available for additional questions for that today also. So let's get started. This is kind of our budget calendar. As you all know, my budget and the tax collector's budget are approved by the Department of Revenue. Us being here today is certainly an opportunity to share with you our vision for the 23 fiscal year, and certainly gives you an idea about what the time frame looks like going forward. My budget statutorily is due to the Department of Revenue June 1st, so we are pretty much done with that, and we'll be going out the door sometime this week. You will be notified of a tentative, you will get a copy of that budget on June 1st, obviously, along with the DOR. And then on July the 15th, the department will do a tentative approval of the budget. And they're waiting for any kind of comments that you may or may not have as a Board of County Commission going back to them. The tax collector, just as a point of reference, his budget is not due until August 1st statutorily by the Department of Revenue. So here are the assumptions that are built into this year's, the 23 fiscal year budget. We're estimating about a 4.5% increase in our total expenditures, and that is based on these assumptions. One, a 6% salary increase, and let me stop there for a second. That is a number that we have been given some guidance by your staff. That's what you're maybe be looking at for your budget going forward for the 23 fiscal year. Point of reference, the way the rules of the Department of Revenue work, with, again, from my office and the tax collector's office, is that I cannot exceed, nor can the tax collector exceed, what you give your employees for raises. It's either it's the greater of, what the state employees got or what the BCC is doing for their employees. The state of Florida employees are getting about a 5.4% increase this year. So at the very least, it would be that number. If you decide not to go 6%, I will tell you if you go above the 6% number, I probably will need to be doing some kind of budget amendment, just because from a fairness perspective and to keep everybody on an even playing field here. So that's where the 6% comes from. There's a 5% increase on insurance rates. There's obviously an FRS increase in rates, again, that affects all of us, governmental employees. And our full-time equivalents remain at 48 positions. Here's how we break down the budget. You will get 3 letters. Again, this is all statutorily driven. It's not something to make it more complicated. This is, just how it is. You will get 3 letters from my office about what each of your funds, you control 3 funds, the general fund, the fire fund, and the road fund. So you will get a letter, and this is that proportional share of what that budget will be for those 3 funds. For all of our mathletes on the board, which I know we've got several, you will see that does not add up to the $6.7 million. The St. John's Water Management District pays a very small fractional piece of the budget, but you are 99% of it basically. This is the budget submittal letter. You can see it's dated yesterday. That will be going out to the DOR. And I shared this with you last year, but I think it's important for both you and the public to understand also. We're just not out there, making up stuff. The department does a very intensive study of the budget. And there are a number of worksheets and schedules that have to go with the budget for their review in that 45-day window that they are reviewing it. That's kind of shows you what those schedules look like. We certainly will not spend much time on those, but that's how it's broken down. Salaries, obviously, and personnel services are the 2 biggest pieces of that budget. It's a little bit hard to see, but this is a summary sheet of how those schedules work out. And again, the biggest number on there is for personnel services. We have to submit an organizational chart to the Department of Revenue also. This is kind of gives you some idea about how the office is organized, and so that it can make sure, that we actually have an organization that we're actually working with. And that the positions that are outlined in the budget are also outlined on the organizational chart. We always like to do this. Again, the department reviews all 67 property appraisers' budget, and they have matrix that they compare us to other counties across the state. And certainly, there's some counties that are more comparable to us than others. Comparing us to a Miami-Dade or to a Dixie County probably is not appropriate. But Sarasota County, the Pasco counties of the world, et cetera, that's how they're looking at our funding, our per capita spending, that type of thing. So this is how it breaks down. Statewide, the median price to run a property appraiser's office per capita is about $25. That ranges everything from $9.53 all the way up to $74. And yes, that is Dixie County. And Seminole County comes in at $13.15 per capita. We are the 8th lowest out of the 67 counties in the state of Florida. We have the 13th largest population. And you can see, because I know we love to do this here, and it's always a good point of reference, how we compare to our neighbors. And Sarasota County is one of our more comparable counties, and so you can see how we compare per capita, and we're very proud of that, and I've got a great team of folks who help me with that on a day-to-day basis. This is another chart that I think is very important. This gives you an idea about the delta between how much the tax roll has grown and what our staffing levels look like. And the top red line is the tax roll has grown about 76%, while our staffing level has decreased over the last, since 2010. This is all a function, it's not that Seminole County is not growing, obviously. We have a tax roll that's increasing exponentially and continues to do so. But we have made decisions over the year, with your help from a funding standpoint, to invest in technology and to be as efficient as possible in running the office. And we're real proud of that. This gives you an idea about the percentage change in budget over the last 5 years from our budget perspective. And again, just on average, we're about 3.29% A lot of that, again, is driven by salaries more than anything else. We had a conversation about this a few weeks ago, probably about a month or so now, about tax roll growth, what we saw going forward in the future. We are projecting that you're going to have about 11% growth in your tax roll for the 23 fiscal year. When I was here a few weeks ago, a month or so ago now, I said 10 to 11%, so we're right there. I will tell you, we are finalizing those numbers. We will be sending that out to your staff. We're doing some final edits and that type of thing. This week, we'll be sending that out to your very competent staff here in the next week or so, along with the 7 cities and the school board. It's going to be a little bit north of 11%, to be honest with you, not significant, so don't, anybody go bet the farm or anything like that. But that's where we are, and you can see how that relates to the past several years. Remember, that's with a 3% cap on all of our homesteaded properties and a 10% cap on our commercial properties. I find a really interesting statistic. The school board's millage is not, school board's taxable value is not affected by the 10% cap. It is affected by the 3% cap on Save Our Homes. They do not have the second $25,000 homestead exemption like you do. If you did not have that, your tax would be going up about 15%. So that's the difference, the delta between that 10% cap and the second 25,000 homestead exemption. It's about over 4%, which is on a $50 billion tax roll, that's real money. So one of the things that we had talked about over the last year or so, and we certainly implemented with the help of Bryant, is we, from a total transparency standpoint, is we now have the quarterly budget information out there on the website. We have a direct link from the front page. I will tell you, and this is what it looks like. Certainly, we have it through the March 31st, through the 2 first quarters of the year. It's the least visited page on the website. Sometimes in government, I think we are trying to find solutions to a problem that may or may not exist, but I'm happy to put that out there. It's transparent. We have gotten a couple of questions from folks, but it's out there for anybody. It's not sexy, it's not exciting at all, and nor should it be, by the way. I think that's a good compliment, but it's certainly there, and we enjoyed working with your staff on making that happen. And again, I feel very confident in our transparency and glad to do it. One of the things that I'm really excited about too, we talked about technology and utilizing technology and helping us become efficient. We have embarked on a project that's almost completed of what we call street level imagery. It's kind of like the Google, but it's not real time, but it is more up to date than Google, and it's information that is very specific to us and ties directly back to our property information database using geocoding and that type of thing. We hired a contractor who literally went through and took a picture of every property in the county. That will be uploaded on the website here soon. Certainly, some of it's already internal. We will also be providing that to the 911 system from a public safety perspective so that they know what they're actually looking at when they arrive at the property. This helps my staff sitting in the office do much better appraisal work. Is that property really comparable to the property down the street, or is there something going on? The whole county has been done. That's our base. And we will do a fourth of the county every year, okay? So there will be no image that's more than 4 years old. Certainly for new construction and that type of thing, our staff will be carrying with them, digital cameras that will geocode it back to the parcel data. So again, we look forward to the efficiency that will bring to us, and we certainly the public safety perspective that also brings. And with that, I am finished and am available for any of your questions.
Thank you, David. Before we go to the board, is there anyone in the audience I'd like to speak to, or anything that we've seen so far to date on the property appraiser only? Shani, do we have any written requests?
I have one. She didn't specify which constitutional officer she wanted to speak about.
Person's name?
Catherine Christie.
Is this She's shaking her head no. Okay. All right. Board members, do you have any questions for Mr. Johnson? Commissioner Herr?
I just want to say thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your support.
Commissioner Zimbow?
Ditto. Thank you. It's always a pleasure seeing you in the chambers, and I think you do a wonderful thing with technology, which makes this commissioner very excited. And I think you've been very innovative in your office, and I thank you for that.
Thank you.
Commissioner Constantine, any comments?
Yeah, David, over the years since I've been here, you've remained consistent. In fact, looking at this chart that Tim has presented to us, you've actually, percentage-wise of the total budget, gone down, which is different from all the other constitutionals, I might add. And I think even this year, you went from 2.2 to 2.1 of the actual percentage. As looking at the budget over the course of the last decade, the percentage total of all constitutionals, understanding that the sheriff's office is the largest, has gone up. And it's hovering around the 64 percentile. Having no questions about your budget, and knowing that your budget is at 2.1 of that approximate 64%, if these percentages continue to go up as they have, it's non-sustainable for the entire county. Being the senior constitutional, and the one that also, as I said, has kept his budget more in check than anyone else, do you see a concern, or do you see a solution in maybe starting to look at percentages of the budget for every constitutional, knowing that they can plan within that percentage, and also knowing that each and every time the percentage goes up, whoever's sitting in Tricia's seat at the time has to cut our budget and our services out of the general 36% that's remaining. So do you see a possibility of that moving forward to giving each constitutional a percentage of the budget that they can plan and work within?
Well, I would be very cautious to speak for my other 4 constitutional officers, okay? I think I understand what you're trying to do is to identify that portion of the budget that particular constitutional office absorbs.
I'm trying to do transparency,
Right.
accountability.
And I appreciate that.
Transparency, accountability, and
And I
course,
think,
yeah.
and again, I don't want to speak for the other 4, but I think, knowing my colleagues, we are very comfortable with being very transparent. I don't know what that looks like in the future when we're maybe not the same people in the same seats, but I think looking to the current group, that we're very comfortable in being as transparent as possible with our taxpayers. And I certainly understand your dilemma as a board of having to not only run your very large department, okay, and then funding our individual offices. And it's certainly something that we as a county, I mean, most of you know, most of this is driven by personnel, and we are certainly in interesting times with salaries and all that stuff. So I totally understand what you're trying to do. And again, from a transparency perspective, I have no problem with that. That's what I can speak to.
If I may finish, the group of 5 that we have now, I think we're in the best position to potentially do this. Considering each and every one of them have a grasp of their own budget and understand what their priorities are. I also see it as a sustainability issue, not only a transparency, not only accountability, but also a sustainability. Because again, in talking to our staff, when we get these budgets, we add them all and compute them all, then folks like, as I said, Tim and Tricia are now making $6 million cuts in our budget, is that correct? 6 million approximately, once we get the constitutional dollars in, Tricia?
Yes.
And everybody else gets what they want. And this is a constant thing that goes on and on and on. And at some point, we have to look at it as a whole, but also, individual parts. So
Yeah,
that's why I'm just looking at
No,
potential
Yeah, and I know
solutions.
you're thinking out loud. I think there's some good ideas maybe looking forward. I would also, of course, you being a former legislator, I don't know what that looks like from a statutory perspective, because can you freeze a certain percentage? I think that would be an internal.
Under mutual agreement.
Right.
You can, but at the same time, nobody expects anybody to say if there isn't some sort of extraordinary circumstance that would come up, that there wouldn't be able to have, flexibility. But yes, you can do that, and, it's a mutual agreement of sustainability moving forward, if that was a potential that people were talking about.
Right, and I know you know this, but also remember that there's two parts of this tax bill that goes out in November. The assessment that I come up with and the millage rate. And certainly, you've got one of the lowest millage rates in the region, and actually one of the lowest in the state. And I'm certainly not advocating for tax increases at all. I'm a taxpayer here too, I've lived here my whole life. But those are conversations that we have to have with the public, the five of us and the five of you. If we think these are needs that have to be funded in this community, then we have to be out there and selling that. And I know you know this also, we have certain members of our community with a large megaphone, okay? You and I have done enough budget meetings, everybody in this room, that it's us on those summer nights, okay, and maybe one or two other taxpayers. And again, I'm not advocating for tax increases at all, but what that tells me as an elected official, and I think it tells you, is that people are relatively happy with the level of services that they're receiving and what they're paying for. Now, again, we've got all the social media and the loud megaphone folks that are out there who make it sound like we've got huge crowds and buses that are pulling up. But that's, I think it's imperative for us as the five constitutional officers and you as an elected board to, if we have to do something, we have to sell that to this community and make sure they're on board with it.
David, you just made a great point for what I'm looking at. Because number one, when everybody has a piece of the budget that they have
They have to
as you
defend it.
move forward,
Right.
they have to defend it.
That's correct.
Right now, each and every one of you get also an approval or have a, option to go somewhere else at the state level. Yours is DOR. But the fact is that when we're all pulling in the same direction, right now, when a potential, and that's why I'm talking about sustainability, if we don't come to grips with the increased percentage of the constitutionals and therefore the decreasing percentage of everyone else, there is going to be a breaking point where we're going to have to look at potential, alternatives in funding. How do you like that? I didn't use the word taxes. Alternatives in funding. But that's why I'm saying if we're all pulling the cart in the same direction and we all have a percentage in that we have to defend, I think that would be the best way to go forward together.
Yeah, and I would have no problem defending my budget going forward to any member of this community because I'm very proud of it. I will also say this, and it did not come up during my presentation, but since we're kind of in that genre right now, the biggest existential threat to your tax roll going forward is not the war in Ukraine or even high inflation per se. It is when that legislature meets for 60 days once a year. And you've got to stay, it's kind of funny, but you've got to stay on top of that. And I know you've got a great group.
David, I don't think we're laughing.
Yeah, you've got a great group.
I'm laughing because he's absolutely right.
But that's, when we had the Great Recession, I always like to go back to history a little bit. and Commissioner Delory was part of that equation. It would have been bad, okay, just because of what was going on in the macro economy that we have. But the thing that exacerbated it was the additional $25,000 homestead exemption that the voters approved, and that's fine. They saw a need, and they thought they needed to approve that. But that literally overnight removed $2.5 billion of taxable value off the tax roll. And again, we would have seen a decline in the tax roll probably because of the Great Recession, but that just exacerbated it. So again, I know you have a great team that watches out for you with the Florida Association of Counties and stuff, but just make sure you pay attention to that, because Commissioner Constantine, that's the thing that could throw a wrench in all of our equations. And again, I have no
David,
problem being transparent at all.
I think you make some excellent points, and we actually call those unfunded mandates.
Right.
And the public is amazed when we talk about unfunded mandates and about what that actually costs the citizens of this county annually for unfunded mandates.
Well, one of my other favorite pieces, and again, Commissioner Constantine knows this, is our economically distressed counties. And there's about 30-something of the 67.
Half of the counties.
And those are checks that are written to those counties on an annual basis to fund their budget because of all the state issues that have occurred over the years. So,
David, I
Getting
think
less and less
both.
control, I'm sorry.
Actually, David, I think both you and Commissioner Constantine make some excellent points, but those are issues that need to be addressed at a later date.
right. They're not part of my budget.
This is not part of your budget.
But I love how these philosophical
Thank you for the
discussions.
dialogue,
Thank
because
you.
I thought it was important that we talk about
Absolutely.
that. And also, not only unfunded mandates, but the less and less control we have over all of the budgets that the state continues to take and give to someone else.
Before we conclude, any questions from Commissioner Lockhart?
No, David and I were.
Okay, thank you. David, I want to thank you for your hard work.
Thank you.
I think the coordination that we have with all 5 constitutional officers and our staff and the commission is second to none. I think that the relationships that we have is one of the reasons why the budget is so able to be addressed the way we've been addressing over the number of years. I think it's important that people realize that having that conduit, or I should say the ability to talk to individuals of your staff with ours, work through a lot of these issues before it gets to these budget work sessions. So I want to thank not only you, but your staff and our county staff, as well as the other constitutional staff members. Their hard work actually makes this stuff actually happen. So thank you.
Well, and Tim and Lori and I are on speed dial, and as soon as we see anything that may pop up that would be problematic, we certainly let them know, and think we've not had that conversation many times. So thank you for
Thank you,
that.
David.
Thank you. Appreciate
Appreciate
it. Have a good day.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye, David.
We're going to move on to the next item, which would be the clerk of the court and comptroller, Mr. Grant Malloy.
Good morning.
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 And this is, you're all familiar with Ginny Spencer, Director of Comptroller and Clerk Finance. Let's see here. Okay, thanks so much for having us down here today. Also having the staff, Tony Landry, my CIO, if there's any technology questions. And we also have
Grant, could you move that microphone closer to you, please, so we're picking up everything you're saying?
testing.
Much
Is that
better.
better?
Thank you.
Okay. I'll try to talk louder.
Sorry for the
So
interruption.
Tony Landry, our CIO, is in the audience, as well as Victoria Barnett, who oversees clerk finance. I'll give you a little overview of what we've been doing this year. A lot of good stuff happening at the clerk's office. Then I'll turn it over to Ms. Spencer to go over the numbers. So that's what we'll be doing today. As you know, a lot of you are familiar with our tasks. There's about 1,000 different things the clerk's office does. The clerk of the court and the county courts, the circuit and county courts, are all funded with the Clerk of Court Operations Corporation, which is a bigger part of our budget that's generated through fees that come across the counter, court fines and fees. That's outside of what we're asking for today. That's a totally separate budget. And today's funding request covers the Comptroller Office, which provides the financial support There's a technology component with financial software, security issues regarding county finances. We also have portions of county recording that relate to commission records and historical land records, that sort of thing is covered in our budget. Commission records, as you're aware, keeps track of all the county commission meetings. We make those minutes available online, upgrading the systems there to connect to the videos that are recorded. And we have the county auditor as well. So those are the things that are included in this budget. Some of the things we've been doing the past year, it's been really exciting. We continue to innovate. I think we've got the best clerk's office in the state. We've really gone full speed on improving services. So some of the highlights, one of the things you've seen are the electronic pay stubs we send to you and supervisor elections and clerk employees. Cuts down paperwork, makes it easier on our side. Actually saves time, as we don't have people calling us now asking for their pay stubs because they say check your emails. So that's a big plus. The Time Clock Plus system to help with time entry for doing the payroll. As you know, we do the payroll for all county employees, all county fire department employees, as well as supervisor election and clerk employees. ARPA was a huge workload, as you know, on the county side as well. Processed many thousands of requests for relief that came through federal funding. One of the highlights, too, is by having efficiencies, moving probate out of the civil courthouse, moving it over to the juvenile courthouse by getting rid of paper files. We created office space, able to move the comptroller off the second floor here, turned over about 5,000 square foot of office space back to the county for you to use as you see fit. Other things, Operation Greenlight, we helped almost 1,500 people get their license back. And a real exciting thing is the Self-Help Center. We entered into an agreement with the Orange County Bar Association for low-cost legal help. It's been a huge hit. We've been filling up. We've been doing it on Wednesdays and been filling up that calendar and helping a lot of people access the court system. And, of course, with the changes in the law library, putting more forms online, have more available in our Self-Help Center, which is helping people in Seminole County. Merge the call centers into one on the next page, just some of the other things we've been doing. E-subpoenas for law enforcement has saved about 20,000 sheets of paper already. It speeds up the process working with our local law enforcement, getting the subpoenas out electronically. Value Adjustment Board, Terry's been doing a great job keeping to upgrade that system with our technology side and making it easier for people to file online, submit their paperwork online for the Value Adjustment Board process. Obviously, we've just recently also upgraded the J.D. Edwards system, and so there's just a lot of the things going on that we've been doing. Well, I have another page, too. We're putting an online appointment schedule for passports. Passports are going out. It's just going crazy, and the good news is we did get approved by the State Department to move passports over to the CJC when the remodeling's done. I'd like to get that going as quick as possible. We only have 3 passport stations, and the wait's about a month out. We're doing about 600 a month now. So if we can expand, there's more revenue coming in through passport fees in the future if we can expand the services there. So a lot of things going on. Improved technology. We're upgrading our servers this year after 5 years with our first batch to increase speeds and storage, which will be needed. In front of you, you also have our hot off the press Citizens Financial Report. We do this annually and have been winning the excellence in financial reporting for this. We make this available for folks that come to jury duty. It's available online at SeminoleClerk.org too. You're welcome to use it as a tool. It shows you a good snapshot of county investments, where the tax dollars come, where they go to, some demographic information about Seminole County, and it's a great guide there for people in the transparency, understanding what's going on in Seminole County government. So with that being said, I'll go ahead and jump into the numbers. Ginny was crunching these numbers and working with our staff, so I will turn it over to her to go through, and then we'll answer any questions.
Good morning, Commissioners. Jenny Spencer, Director of Comptroller's Office and Clerk Finance. If we could go back to the other slide for a minute, Grant, the one that, I'm sorry, that shows. I just wanted, as I mentioned to you during the briefing, each briefing, the county's annual comprehensive financial report is prepared by the Comptroller's Office. If you ever have any questions, feel free to call me, because that's prepared by us, which is the certificate that is awarded. We're happy to report the 40th certificate was issued for last year's comprehensive report. And the citizens report is something that Grant started when he took office, and we received the third certificate, and we submitted the one for fiscal year '21 and anticipate we'll receive that one as well. So this provides a summary of the budget that is proposed for the current year, and it shows a comparison for fiscal year '22, which is the current year we're operating, compared to the year that we're requesting. And as you can see, we separated the budget by departments. So the Comptroller's Office and Commission Records is going up by approximately $166,000, or 8%. And there's a couple of factors that are driving that. We have in there the OPEB study, other post-employment benefits valuation, which is a biannual valuation. That's $35,000 that's in there. Also, we have a fee in there for the implementation of GASB 87, Governmental Accounting Standards 87, which is for leases. And you may recall Dan O'Keefe mentioned that would be an upcoming standard that would be applicable in fiscal year '22. So those are two costs that were not in the prior year budget requested. And the other things that are costing the increase includes increase for insurance as well as FRS and salary increases. Records management had a slight decrease of approximately 4%. IT, or information services, shows an increase of approximately $294,000, or $34,000. That's due to a few things. There's an additional FTE in there in the '23 proposed budget compared to last year. There were 3. This year there are 4. The new FTE is the network administrator that's included. In addition, there's some operating costs that are in there this year due to some maintenance contracts that are expiring, and they're expiring in '23 and will need to be renewed. In an effort to take advantage of discounts, we typically sign a multi-year maintenance contract to take advantage of the discount. So that's what's driving the increase. The Record Center shows about a 10% reduction. Let's step back. The Inspector General shows about a 3% increase. That's just due to normal salary increases. The Record Center shows a 10% reduction. You may recall last year's budget, we requested funding for an AC for the vault, which is not recurring this year, so that's why you're seeing the reduction, a net reduction. And the other administrative support has a slight increase of approximately $23,000, or 5%. And that's due to an additional FTE that was added in the current year for our HR department. One of the things that Grant has implemented is onboarding, trying to really see staff from inception through during the probation period in an effort to retain staff. And the budget amendment, you may recall in January, we requested a budget amendment of $150,000. There were 3 things that were in that budget amendment. One of them was a JDE upgrade for $80,000. Another one was $13,000 for Dead Book, which is the implementation of GASB 87, and a new FTE, which was an Accountant 1 position. So in comparison, when you take into account the amended, approved and amended budget, it's a net increase of $281,000, or 6%. And it provides, on the far right, it shows you the composition of where the budget is allocated. 46% is Comptroller's Office and Commission Records. IT is approximately 24%. The Record Center is 10%. The Inspector General's Office is 9%, and administrative support is 10%. The next slide just really shows a breakdown of the budget by object account as required by the Uniform Accounting System. And we provide it because that helps the Resource Management Department to align our numbers with where the numbers in the county's budget. And this is a slide, like most organizations, it shows the majority of our expenditures are related to personnel, so 75% is related to personnel costs. And then you have about 9.2% is other operating costs. Rental and leases, which Grant will talk about, the rental of the Record Center, the lease agreement on that is approximately 8%. Other professional services is approximately 7.6%, and capital outlay is 0.3%. And this shows a comparison of FTE from one year to the next. So it shows for the current year we're operating in, our FTE count is 33.24 compared to our proposed, which is 35.06. So the increase you're seeing is the additional FTE in IT, as well as the additional FTE that was approved in January for the Comptroller's Office. One of the things that Grant mentioned during our briefing, which he'll go over, is the lease on the Record Center is approximately $400,000 of the clerk's budget. And the lease was entered into prior to him taking office, and it was a 10-year lease that expires in May 2027. So one of the things that Grant has expressed is, we need to start evaluating what will happen at the time of the lease expiration and start planning for it. And at this point, I'll turn it over to Grant so he could elaborate on the Record Center as well as
Right, and
opportunities.
I've mentioned it to all the commissioners and private discussions, and with the county manager, it's just something to think about down the road, is what do we do with the Record Center building? We have 6 years left on it. It is a pretty large part of our budget, the $400,000 is, added there, plus there's the maintenance. We don't have a facilities department, potentially needs some roof repairs in the future. So when I got there, the sewage system wasn't working, so there's been a lot of improvements we've been making to it to improve it. It's a great building. It works well. I'm, as I mentioned earlier, looking at getting recording out of there because it doesn't lend itself to retail services very well. And we're not going to need the same footprint. As we've gone paperless, my goal is to get at least to a half the size, preferably a third the size of that building to retain what we need to. We have the vault in there, which we upgraded the air conditioner system. We have the plats. So there are some things we do need to store. And we are partnering with the sheriff for, he's put some facilities in there, and we help out a couple other government agencies as well. But just something to think about in the future. Do we build something smaller? Do we buy that? Do we renew the lease? If we do renew the lease, I'd rather turn it over to the county and have it off my books and not have to worry about the maintenance on that building because it's really not in our skill set. The other thing I want to point out, I know we're part of the county salary study that you guys will be talking about. We have not yet made it to the $15 an hour. That's one of our goals, is to keep moving that up. But it has been, especially on the comptroller side, increasingly difficult to fill spots, even on the court side. So salaries is an issue that we hope to work with you on and see how we can address that and work within our budget and the constraints of what we have to get people in the door, because right now we're still about 20 positions overall down from where we were pre-Great Resignation. And with that, I turn over for any questions or any details.
Mr. Malloy, before we go to the board, is there any questions from, or no written requests? Anyone in the audience would like to address the clerk and comptroller? Seeing none, we'll go to the board. This time we'll go from this end. Commissioner Lockhart?
One of the things that we were able to talk about in our briefing ahead of time was open positions and how you're managing with your lapsed salary dollars. Do you want to just talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So by statute, any unspent dollars at the end of the fiscal year has to be returned to the county. So if those positions are not filled and those dollars are in our budget, we return it back to the Board of County Commissioners.
And is that the same for all constitutional officers? Are all lapsed salary dollars returned to the board?
Yes.
One of the things that makes our office a little different than others is both on the court side and then on the county side, we're generating revenue through real estate sales, mortgages. Those, of course, are starting to drop with the higher mortgage rates. We don't always know what the future is going to hold, but last year we were able to return, it was around $600,000 back to the county in excess fees from the recording side, and any leftovers from the comptroller side were sent. And then on the state side, due to the cap over there, we sent back about $700,000.
$700,000.
Yes. So altogether, even though our budgets come in, we can't always. We generate generally more than we are allowed to spend or need to spend. So when that happens, we try to be respectful about tax dollars, like all of us here, and return that back to the taxpayers. So last year we returned overall about $1.3 million back to the state and the county.
Thank you. Commissioner Constantine?
Grant, you and I have had a discussion about what I talked to David about, and also, did you care to comment on that?
Well, I think if you set up some goals and standards, early in the budget process, and you want us to meet a certain goal, I think that's fair as long as all of us play by the same rules. So I'm receptive to whatever
Thank you.
direction you want to give. Yeah.
Mr. Zimbauer, any comments?
Thank you. And Grant, thank you for the presentation, and I appreciate you leveraging the discount of front-loading some of the costs when it comes to some of the services in your IT and information services area. And I also want to take the opportunity to thank you, during the uncertain times of finances, when you came to us and needed additional funding, which our staff worked diligently, and I'm forever grateful about that. In providing that additional funding, I want to recognize that when that all played out, you returned money back to the county. And that's what it's about, working together, and when you have that need and having that reciprocate back to the county. So I appreciate it very much.
Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate your help back then, because when COVID came and things went to zero on our court side, working with you and shifting that over, luckily it didn't stay down there for as long as we feared, and we were able to bounce back up. But it was a humongous, stressful time with our office, so I appreciate
Thank you,
that.
Commissioner Herr.
So when you did the advanced technology maintenance, you're booking that all in 1 year?
So we record it as a prepaid expenditure, and we amortize it over the life of the maintenance contract. However, to pay and get the discount, the cash outlay is done in that year.
Okay. And if you netted that out of the arrangement, what would that put your increase year over year at?
Let's see how much the maintenance contracts.
The total delta is 300 grand, and it's a portion of the 300 grand, but I don't know what that number is.
And what we're doing is we're upgrading our servers over at the CJC, where we've enhanced the IT room. You've worked with us on backup generators and backup air conditioners. After about 5 years, they get a refresh, so we're working with NetApp to put in new equipment, and that covers the county financial software as well as court side, and it's allocated, so the court side gets paid through with the trust fund for IT improvements.
So the maintenance contract is in that total that shows $117,057 under IT's budget. And of that, from what I can see, I see it's approximately $35,000.
So 35,000 is the prepaid, so that's not what's driving the overall increase.
No, what's driving the overall increase in that $113,000, there's some costs associated with internet that's in that number, $113,420, as well as...
One FTE is in the information services category.
As well as an amount in there for JDE support and web design.
So, and we did have a really good briefing in advance, and so this will come as no surprise. I truly do align with your thought process. I don't know that we lock and load around a certain percentage of the budget, but I am exceptionally concerned. The 5-year average here is the highest of the constitutional officers. When you look at the year over year as presented, it looks tolerable because 162,000 is shown as a BAR from last year, which it was, but so last year we presented a number that didn't have the 162 in it. This year we're presenting a number in terms of percentage changes that doesn't have the 162 in it. But when you look at it over a 5-year average, it's a 13% increase. It's higher than 13. And so the word used earlier, unsustainable, is it's a real thing.
So if I could,
What was the salary increase that was built in?
5%. So if I could step back a little bit, Commissioner, and explain. So over the years, when the county had fleet outsourced to Serco, fleet was brought in-house. We didn't ask for additional staffing during that time, and our workload had almost doubled the amount of invoices that were now being processed by facilities. Also, with the CARES Act and the emergency rental assistance, with all the different stimulus activities, it's created a lot of additional work. With the spending of the third gen tax, with the infrastructure sales tax, it's created a lot of additional, the volume has increased. And not only that, the complexity of accounting transactions and different standards that have to be implemented, it required that we had additional staffing, and not just at a clerk level, at a professional level. In addition to that, there's other things that are planned. For example, when the county goes out to issue bonds, that's going to require additional resources on the comptroller's office, because we work directly with underwriters as well as the bond counsel and disclosure counsel. So those are additional things. The county has evolved from the county when I started as a director 10 years ago to now. There's a lot more activity, there's a lot more volume, there's a lot more complicated accounting transactions that require more professional skills. We have more professionals on staff now than when Grant took office, and it was really necessary in order for us to maintain the level of professionalism and remain compliant with all the different standards. So when we presented the budget last year, we did mention to the county manager we were looking at what resources could be used for implementation of GASB 87. Deadbook was the company, after different demonstrations, it was the most cost-effective, and it was $13,000. That was part of the budget. The reason J.D. Edwards was not included in last year's initial budget, there was an amount in the budget that was a contingency amount, and the amount I felt was not substantiated without a quote. So IT included it in the budget. We backed it out and said until it could be supported, we didn't want to include it, because the estimated amount was $150,000. And I said until we could have support, we backed it out. When we were able to obtain quotes, we provided it to resource management and provided the documentation to request a budget amendment. The other $12,000 that's in there, it relates to an evidence project that was going on the court side that facilities had been paying, and that was the balance that was left. Rather than facilities completing it and being a third party, the funds were transferred directly to the clerk to complete that project. So that's why at the time the budget was presented, they were not included.
So I just want to be clear. I have no problem with numbers not being presented at the time of the budget and coming in with the BAR afterwards. What I struggle with is when we represent year-over-year increases and move that BAR into the previous budget as though it was there, but when the budget was presented in the previous year, the year-over-year increase would have been deflated compared to where it ended up, and now we're doing it again. So it is a tad confusing at best. And then I do want to, I know you have a comment, but I do want to go in and say, thank you for that very good articulation of the fact that the workload has increased, the need for professional staff has increased, and I'm just going to give a question. Would the county staff like to give me a hell yeah for us too? Maybe, okay. So we're all in this together, and the phenomena that was described earlier where the allowable the revenue coming in, it's all about top line, bottom line. The top line coming in is sitting in general fund, general right around 9. Do I have that number right?
That's right.
And we're having requests that are well above 9. And what that means is that we, apparently, on the county side of this equation, we're expected to have less every year, and our needs are doing the same. In order for you to go and do bonds, there's a significant amount of work on the front end of our team. We all know this. So I'm just pointing this out from the perspective that, quite honestly, I was on the campaign trail with all of you saying, no new taxes, no new taxes, no new taxes, and this doesn't support that. I'm just going to call it like I see it.
Commissioner, if I could address something. First of all, when you look at the size of our budget, it's one of the smallest ones in front of you. And when you factor in things like the rent and how much we return, that's about $1 million out of a $4.8 million proposed budget. When you talk about it,
Can I just want to validate my notes. It's $600,000 that got returned to the county, the other went to the state.
The other
600,000 is
700.
300 above the previous numbers.
Okay.
So
But
it
I'm just
it doubled in the last year, but historically has been around 300 grand based on the numbers you guys gave me. I'm using rough numbers because I
Right.
know it was
And
in the 2 range.
our-
Jenny's getting nervous because
No,
they're not, it's
no,
not
I'm
exact,
fine.
but I gave you grace on that.
But the point is, we have a very small budget in comparison to other offices and other departments, even within the county. And when you talk about a 10%, it's still fairly small. You know, as a large 400,000, you know, would correlate to a large percentage. But I would just point out, you get what you pay for. And if you go back to the budgets before I was in office, you had the county finance was on a server and a building with no generator backup, with a window on it by a lake that floods. We had tape drive backups. We had one CPA at one time working for our office. It was Jenny. You know, we're trying to make a professional office that you can all be proud of and we can serve as citizens. So, you know, if you want us to go back to the previous budgets, I don't think that would be good. We have a great office. We're doing good things. We're providing service, I think your staff and everybody would agree, to a level that's never been seen before, probably in the history of this county.
I would, my feedback is I don't want you to go backwards, but should this county have the need to go forward in a different direction, we will need your support.
And if I could just elaborate, I think I'm not sure if we're comparing apples to apples, because some of the years, there are some of the years in there where the excess fees were reduced initially from our budget. And so what you're seeing is a net budget. There were 3 years in a row that the amount that was funded was net of the expected excess fees. We don't know what the excess fees are, so we're saying this is what the clerk needs to operate his constitutional duties. I can assure you the initial budget that I presented to the clerk was slashed. It was not approved. I had to go back and sharpen pencils, and that was a number that he could live with, the net of $281,000 increase. So any dollars that are not spent will be returned to the Board of County Commissioners, but we don't know what that number is at this point.
So as a follow-up item, I would love to see you and Tim work together on what is that net impact with fees coming back into it, whatever fee returns are over the past 5 years.
Thank you. Let's move on for a moment. Commissioner Constantine?
And Commissioner Herr, what I heard from the clerk is that they would work with and support, if we went forward with that. Because again, I believe that our constitutionals have the ability to work within a percentage, know their priorities, and establish that and bring forth their own budget that they can share with us, but it'd be their budget. And it would be transparent, it would be accountable, and most importantly, for all of us, it would be sustainable for the future.
Thank you, Commissioner Constantine. Mr. Applegate, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, a couple of things, Mr. Chairman. First, as a member of the bar, I just want to point out, as I've said it the last couple of years, when I go to events, I repeatedly hear the appreciation of the members of the bar for the modernization of the clerk's office and how it's helped the attorneys and the whole judicial system in Seminole County. Heck yeah. Heck yeah.
Maybe I should have said that.
No, heck yeah. But also, we're all in this together, and I know that this has been a big point, that the constitutionals, along with all of us, we're in this together. And I know that our staff works very well with the clerk's office and the comptroller's office, and very, very appreciative of that, so.
Commissioner Lockhart, and then I'd like to say something myself. But no, go ahead, Commissioner Lockhart.
I just wanted to say, the sentiments that are being echoed, I think I had a similar conversation with each of the constitutional officers that I had the opportunity to meet with ahead of time, that we have this bucket, and every year we have to figure out how to divvy up the bucket. And when there's an increase, like we are fortunate enough to have this year, not every year, but this year we're blessed that our revenues will be increasing because of property values. the portion of that increase and how that gets divided up becomes very, it gets kind of parochial, right? Because everybody has their needs that they see through their lens of what they know their organization, or your perceived needs, I should say, I guess, and we have our perceived needs, but we're all drawing from the same bucket. And at some point in time, this board is going to have to either say no to somebody, or not as much to somebody, but it is not sustainable for everyone to get every year everything that they want and have us still be able to run all of the other county operations that we are tasked with running. So it's not a fun message to have to deliver, but I delivered it the same way, I think, to each one of you that I had the opportunity to speak with. And I personally want the feedback from each of you to let us know how we can make this work, because we are all in it together. And we need the sheriff, and we need the clerk, and we need the supervisor of elections, but everything that you all have all requested added together is more than we have. So that's just kind of the basic. When the kids come home from school and they all want their allowance and there's not that much in the bucket, somebody doesn't get what they want that week. So maybe that's oversimplifying it, but that's kind of my world.
Thank you, Commissioner Lockhart. First of all, Grant, thank you. Jenny, can't thank you enough for all your hard work. I believe that your suggestion about the record storage is a good one. I'm glad that you're pointing out to us that the lease runs out in 6 years. The reason why I say that is because I really believe that between now and the time of that lease, hopefully we'll have a plan. I would like to ask our staff to work with your staff, Grant, to try to figure out what is the right thing to do financially. Is it to renew the lease? Is it to build a building? Is it to buy a building? We, as you all do, look at numbers. That's what we all have to do to make sure we're making the right choice for the public as a whole. So I do appreciate you bringing it to attention, and I, for one, would like to ask our staff to, not right now because we're in the middle of a budget session, but once the budget's been approved, to move forward with your staff to try to figure out what is the best thing to do with records and storage as the time frame of the 6 years comes up.
Okay.
So I think that's important. Whatever that decision is, so that we're making a very good, intelligent decision. About some of the ideas that just floated around here, we've been very blessed over the years to have not just a phenomenal staff, but phenomenal constitutional officers and staff of constitutional officers. I do really believe that over the past years that there's been a lot of give and take. I remember during the downturn in the economy, a lot of the budgets have been flat. I don't know if people want to go back that far, but I do remember that. I can even tell you that there's been times where people have done a lot without, and it's not easy to do that, but because of the open dialogue that we've had with our constitutionals and our staff and your all staff, that we've been able to do that. I see we can actually do that in the future. It's not easy to do. That's the reason why sometimes people don't understand why we start the budget process so early. It's almost like by the time we approve our budget in September, you may have a 30-day window of rest, and then after the 30-day window, we're back at it again, or you're all back at it again, trying to figure out what's going to happen in the next budget session. And the same thing goes with the revolving 5-year capital plan or a 3-year capital plan. We are planning for that. It's not just a shot in the dark. Not everybody gets what they want. There's a lot of give and take. I believe that our transparency is really what makes Seminole County special. I believe that the way we have good dialogue with our constitutional officers and our staff to your staff is what makes Seminole County a great place that it is today. We do have one of the lowest millage rates in the region, and I think that's because of all the hard work of our staff, your all staff, as well as the constitutional officers, and transparency. I could tell you that if everybody got what they wanted, we would have built 5 points 10 years ago. And we're still working on 5 points. If everybody got what they wanted, we would have made a lot of changes to not just to this building, but other buildings. It is difficult. That's why we're in these positions. And it is the people's money. And, times are hard, and no one has a crystal ball. And I believe as long as we have open dialogue, full transparency, willing to work with each other, which we are doing, that we'll be able to deal with anything that we comes up with. And I will tell you that even during the downturn in 07, 08, when people thought that, what was happening with the economy, as well as with the state putting additional homestead exemption, we did overcome those obstacles, and we'll overcome these obstacles with what money we have, because we do live within our means. I do appreciate some of the things that Jenny said about with our going out to bonds. There's more work on your side. I appreciate that. I'm sorry you have to do more work, but
We're
that's
fine.
the nature of the business.
We'll be fine.
And you're right, we will be fine. Same thing with all the constitutional officers, we will be fine. But at the same token, we all have to survive with limited dollars that we have. That's what makes Seminole County a great place. So I want to thank you for your hard work.
Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. Any other
Thank you,
comments before we
Commissioners.
go on to the next constitutional?
Thank you.
Grant, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll now move on to supervisor election. Mr. Chris Anderson.
Hold on one moment.
Oh, I'm sorry. Didn't we already go through the public for the clerk?
Not for the clerk.
Oh, we didn't? I'm sorry. Grant, would you mind I thought we did that with the clerk.
did that, too.
In the
Would
morning,
suggest-
we did, when he first came in. We did.
did that.
We did that before we went to the board.
But he came in afterwards.
Oh, I'm sorry, someone else came in? I'm sorry. Can you,
David Walsh.
David, Mr. Walsh? This is just on the clerk?
Yes.
Okay. I'm sorry, Mr. Walsh, I didn't realize you just came in.
Sorry. Thank you, Chair Bob. I'm Dave Walsh. I'm a citizen, Seminole County taxpayer for over 25 years.
Mr. Walsh, could I have your address, please? Your
370
address.
12 Oaks Drive, Winter Springs.
Thank you.
32708. Taking the opportunity of the clerk's presentation, and just wanted to dwell on I had the privilege of managing a $500 million capital budget in a company headquartered in Lake Mary that I ran for quite a while. In Center of Excellence process, the clerk of courts, the administrative manager for the county, now Brian sitting in that role. The Center of Excellence process involves the facilities planning and execution, I think under the county manager. The Center of Excellence for FP&A, financial planning analysis, all the budgeting processes really resides in the clerk of courts very capably. In industry, we did things the same way. Generally, step one in a capital planning process involves an assessment of present available space for duty before any additional consideration of new CapEx goes on. That's kind of a best practice as an industry. Then you look at the breakdown of the space needs between Class A office space, you all know this, and then the warehouse or storage space or manufacturing space, whatever it might be. Cost profile of those two things are very different. Storage space tends to be very low cost, and it appears as though we may have an abundance of that in the county, just indicating in the presentation we just heard for records retention, and the cost of that being a lower cost profile thing. But of course, one wants to look at that. Do we actually possess that already before evaluating major new CapEx? In terms of density of buildings, I put a building in South Orlando that cost about $2.2 million to house about 110 people. Put a building in Lake Mary on a lease basis for about ballparkish $900,000 a year type of lease to house about 250 people. Just to give you an idea of density kinds of metrics that we'd look at. Finally, would comment that I think it is an appropriate process or functional process that once decisions are made to plan major capital programs, they be transitioned to Brian's role as county manager for the procurement process, because it's very delicate, procurement process, dealing with contractors, dealing with engineering, procurement, constructor firms, dealing with architects, dealing with realtors, dealing with developers, all of that execution stuff that falls inside the envelope of a capital project once it's approved. should be submitted to the Center of Excellence, being the county manager for execution. Just my comments on overall capital process. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Grant.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Okay, this time we'll go on to supervisor election, Mr. Chris Anderson. Mr. Anderson? Could you introduce?
Yes, my name is Chris Anderson, Supervisor of Elections representing Seminole County. Good morning. I'd like to start by reading a brief statement about our office. Our office budget for the 2022-2023 we have prepared for the general election, which historically has proven to draw a higher voter turnout. The Supervisor of Elections Office is committed to preserving the integrity of the election process while ensuring every vote counts. You will notice increases and reductions throughout our budget requests. Many of these increases are a direct result of redistricting, higher staffing levels, both in the office and at early voting sites and polling locations, along with trickle-down unfunded mandates. So the 2020 election cycle was an anomaly, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in depth, having a huge impact on the amount of vote-by-mail requests. Our office is currently has over 136,000 vote-by-mail requests on file for the 2022 general election. Will this trend continue is the question. Only time will tell. We'll be able to answer that after the general election this year. Either way, we must be prepared for all the voting scenarios, whether a person decides to vote in person at early voting or at the election day polls or by mail. And keep in mind, every voter gets 3 opportunities to cast 1 ballot. Our pledge is to deliver elite services to every voter, displaying excellence in our organization, leading the way in voter trust, and operating with integrity and providing transparency in our actions and being efficient in what we do. As a Supervisor of Elections Office, I'm very proud to say that we are an award-winning office that received awards from the Elections Assistance Commission over the 2020 election cycle. We're also featured in a Pulitzer Prize-winning book about our efforts during the 2020 election cycle. I always refer to our office as being very fiscally creative, as we are the only elections office in the United States of America that used a Q-tip to run a presidential election cycle, and we won an award for it. And we had to do that because there wasn't enough funds available because no one budgeted for COVID, as we all have discussed prior to. Additionally, we have created a project or a partnership called the Evolve Partnership, which is enhancing voting operations while lifting the voters' experience. We're bringing together folks to include the county staff from a legal perspective, from a cybersecurity perspective, from a physical security perspective, in all areas, including the media, to strengthen our elections process and to address the threats that face, this is proactively addressing threats that face 21st century elections. Things have changed in the world of elections, and I look forward to talking with you more about that. And I will leave it there for any questions.
Any questions so far? Commissioner Lockhart?
Yes.
Would you itemize the unfunded mandates you referenced?
Sure. So one of the things, one of the largest things from Senate Bill 524, and from the last meeting, what I remembered is you had a briefing from Oscar Anderson from Southern. He talked about a lot of the legislative changes that took place. One of the things I realized that was absent from that briefing was elections. One of the things I would recommend to the board is to start adding that in, because there are some very aggressive aggressive bills that come out for election administration now, and all of them are unfunded when they ask us to do more, and to which we've done. The biggest thing from Senate Bill 524 is now we are required to do list maintenance every year. List maintenance is basically, to describe it, is we have 335,035 voters. Now we are required to find out where all of them are at every year. And that's usually been something that was done in off years, because obviously that's when we have time to do it. Now remember, you're asking 17 staff members now to track 335,035 individuals in a list maintenance process. That takes quite a bit of work. That is the number one responsibility of the Supervisor of Elections office. And one of the things that I would like to point out is we are severely understaffed. This is a conversation that we have had from my office with the board many, many times in the past about our staffing table or our staffing levels. Right now, as we speak, we did a study. For one vote, for one employee, they are servicing 18,618 or 15 people. The average, and I can show you the.
Well, so right now I have list maintenance. What are the other unfunded mandates?
So the next unfunded mandate came from Bill 7066, which said, okay, we want you to get rid of all vote-by-mail ballots or vote-by-mail envelopes because we're going to add a line on that envelope, the return envelope, for your name, or for your, not your name, but your phone number and your email address. So that's what caused the increase in our budget in 18 and 20. So when that happened, that was about, I'd say, $250,000 to replace because we had to get rid of all of our vote-by-mail envelopes.
Let me just clarify, because
Sure.
I don't want you to have to go back to things that aren't pertinent to this increase. So what is new this year that's an unfunded mandate that is causing the increase? Right now I have list maintenance.
List maintenance is the biggest driver.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
We're going to go through your presentation?
Yes, and this is to Commissioner Lockhart's point. As we talk about our study, you can see here that we use different counties that are like-sized counties, because it wouldn't be good to compare ourselves to, say, Palm Beach County, which has over 1 million voters, that we are operating at our staff levels are extremely low, and we're operating under where we should be. 18,000 voters per employee. That's quite a bit of work. We're being asked to do
Chris, can we
more.
go back to the first slide and
Sure.
go through into session?
Yeah. So the first slide, this is just an overall look at our actual versus requested. And as you can,
That's
our
not the first
budget
slide.
versus
There's one
actual.
more slide before that.
This one?
Yep, that's the
Sure.
first slide. Thank you.
So this shows our budgets, and what this basically is showing you is that our budget is very cyclical. So you're going to see some decreases, you're going to see some very low decreases and some very high increases. What drives that is your elections. So your 2021-2022 budget that we're in right now is going to pay for your primary election. And the budget that we're discussing right now, which is 2022-2023, will pay for your general election. So I'll go through in detail to show you how those apply to the elections. One of the things that I did is I went ahead and changed the budget process for the office. It was very antiquated. We hadn't increased it. We haven't changed that since 2008. Now what we've done is we're able to see our core expenditures or our core needs versus our needs that we will have for elections. So we can point them out better to the board and better educate you on what is an elections cost versus a core cost. So as we talk about our personnel, which is about 63% of our budget, that is the largest piece, because as all my constitutional colleagues will say, I can say with a degree of certainty that we don't sell a product, we sell a service. So this particular slide just shows the cyclical nature of our budget. The next slide shows that we are basically budgeting correctly. If you look at our budget, the light blue shade is what is budgeted, and the navy blue would be what is our actual, what we spend. And as you can see, it's very consistent. The only anomaly would be 2020, which is an anomaly year. And that year, we actually gave the board back over $450,000. Now, $243,000 of that in that year was from CARES Act funds. The next slide is our registered voters to staff, which I have already spoken about, which shows if you look at Lake County, Marion County, Leon County, these are counties that have considerably lower voters, but they have more staffing, more space, all of those things, which shows that as you look at Seminole County, which is considered to be a large county SOE office by the Florida Supervisor of Election standards, 250 and above is what it is. We are a large county SOE office, and we are severely behind where we should be. The next slide is showing you the mail ballots. This is the area where it's very costly. And essentially, this is resource management. There's nothing that we can do about this. If we have 136,000 mail ballot requests, that's what we're mailing. In 2020, we mailed out that amount, and we got back about 104,000. So vote by mail is becoming a very popular method of voting. Now, yes, we have to take a look after this election to see if that trend will continue, but I will say that as of right now, we have 98,000 vote by mail requests on file for the primary election and 134,000 requests on file for the general election. And I will leave it there. Those are my slides, if there's any other questions.
Do you have any more information you want to provide on the fiscal budget report for 2022-2023?
Sure. So let's start with our salaries. So more precincts, more people. As you we'll have a meeting next week about this. We are now doing our re-precincting now that redistricting has been done. In the job of re-precincting is to make sure that every voter in the county has equal access to the ballot. And if you are aware, we've had precincts that were exploding. One of them was in the Oviedo area, precinct 71. It had over 8,000 voters in one precinct. That is way too many voters in one precinct. So we had to reallocate, and that's what you do during a re-precincting year. So that's what we've done, and we were able to conservatively reallocate resources, and we're going to increase our precincts by only 2 precincts, but that does require more voting equipment, more staffing, more materials, more extension cords, more of everything. So that's another natural increase that will take place because of the growth that the county has seen. Another thing is with our staffing. Our starting pay was $12.65 an hour. That is very, very low. And I could see that from the amount of applications that were coming in. It was pretty depressing. And just like every other office, we need to hire more people. I'm very grateful that the board acknowledged in April that, increases needed to happen, and you voted on that, and you included us in that discussion. And we were able to increase our starting pay from $12.65 to $15 an hour. As I've said in previous meetings, we have now seen an increase in our applications coming in, which is very exciting and gives us hope. And where we need to increase is in our voter services area, because that is where a lot of the unfunded mandates that come from our legislator are being directed to more of a voter services focus. We also decided that it was appropriate for us to increase our election worker and our seasonal staff. That pay hadn't been increased, and quite frankly, I have received some feedback from all of our great election workers that they would like to see a bit of a pay increase, and it wasn't. It was very nominal. We increased the pay probably about $10 overall. It's not a lot of money that you make serving as an election worker. Most of them feel that it is a civic duty, but they are always looking at the compensation. So that hadn't been increased since 2014, and we were able to do that as well. Now the number that to do an overall increase for the agency, and you might want to hold your seats here, it's a pretty startling number, it was $25,000. And that's just to say that the Supervisor of Elections Office budget is the smallest budget in the county. It is the smallest budget in the county. And as we talk about the increase of 17%, focusing on the percentage, and the dollar amount is $660,000 overall. So we're talking about an increase of $660,000, which I will explain is election-related information. The next thing would be our overtime. You know, we're going to have to work overtime during the election season. There's just no way around that. There's going to be a large push for voter registration. I can tell you that political parties are putting access of $15 million in voter registration pushes. How does that affect the elections office? Because we're required to key in all those applications and run elections at the same time. That's a lot of work to do. And that is another driver that pushes a lot of work in after hours. Also, too, as our seasonal staff and our election workers are working on elections, our full-time staff members, they have to be present there to support what they need. And to speed things along a little bit, as you talk about adding, and we've added in some two positions. We've added in an IT technician. This is something that I have always focused on, is our cybersecurity posture. As you know, this is of great concern in the world of elections. We currently only had 2 individuals focusing on that. One of those individuals is focusing more on the maintenance and concern around our voting equipment. So we need another IT professional that can work on making sure our network stays secure 365 days a year. The next one is a deputy chief for voter services. One of the things that I identified in coming in office is that there was a lack of succession planning in the office. So, you know, when I asked, I said, what happens to this person if something happens to them? And there was no answer to that. That's critical and that's dangerous. We want to make sure that we're cross-training and that we have highly trained individuals at all times in our office. So we need to bring in another highly skilled individual, because one of the things we're faced with as a very, very small staff is attrition. We have about 60 years of experience set to walk out of our door for retirement, and I understand their decisions to retire next year. And we have to be able to, and there's no way that you can replace one of our longest serving employees, but that job, as she will tell you, has changed when she started 25 years ago. So that may require us to hire 3 or 4 more people to replace her, but unfortunately that is not an option at this point. But we can bring in someone that is prepared to take over that position and understand the duties that comes with it. As you add more people to your staff, that's going to increase a couple of different areas: your Social Security, your retirement, health, and unemployment compensation. Those are non-discretionary. Those are just the natural increases that come with adding your full-time FTEs in place. Also, it also increases when we start hiring election workers. We hire about 1,000 of them. When we hire them, that also has an effect on our unemployment compensation being 100% reimbursable. The next area that I'd like to talk about would be professional services. You know, the elections world is seeing an increased amount of litigation. We are still dealing with cases from the 2020 election cycle. And we are still getting massive amounts of requests from public records requests. Some involve legal. We have just had to, and this is a statewide issue for all SOEs, where we're just in a need for more legal help than we needed previously. And as we are looking at challenges from congressional maps to drop boxes or secure ballot intake stations, as they're currently referred to now, and also increasing in our canvassing days. Now that we have an increase in vote by mail, it's going to take us longer to be prepared to deliver results on 7 p.m. So I've had to increase the amount of time that we would actually start canvassing vote by mail ballots. And there are challenges that can come up in that meeting that our legal team needs to be prepared to address immediately. Contracted services. So this is an area where we talked about the purchase of more voting equipment. When we made the initial purchase in 2017,
there were some unknowns as to how that equipment was going to operate inside the precincts. So what we had to do was, it was always just learning on the job. Our voting equipment right now is 2 general election cycles old. However, the growth of the county still never slowed down. I pointed to this before. We added 30,000 voters to the voting roll in 2 years. That is an unprecedented amount of growth, and every one of those individuals still have a right to the services in which my office provides. So we purchased an additional 8 DS200s to accommodate higher voter registration populations, improve the traffic flow at our larger precincts, and also it's the creation of precincts due to re-precincting. We're naturally going to need more voting equipment. We're going to need extra voting equipment for our early voting sites as well. So we had to go out and purchase those. But when you purchase them, guess what comes with them? Your maintenance and licensing fees. This is something that our budget has not seen prior to 2017. This is a major change in voting equipment. Now, as I've said, and I'll repeat this, when it comes to our voting equipment, we can't just go out and buy it from any manufacturer. It has to come from an approved and certified vendor from the Department of State. And as it sits, there's only 2, and one of them is ES&S, which is what we use, and that is a major vendor right now in the state of Florida.
Thank you, Chris. Anything else?
Sure. One area that I would like to point out, last 2 areas actually, is our postage. Even though there is a decrease there. There is a decrease in the budget of 34.9%, and this is a direct effect of elections-related costs. We're not going to, our mailer, our countywide mailer for all voting cards is a requirement by law, but we're going to be paying for that out of this fiscal year, so it will not need to be in this budget this year. So that's about $100,000 decrease in our budget. That is that's a mandate that has to happen, has to be budgeted for, and there's nothing we can do about that. But we won't need to do that in this year. So that speaks to the cyclical nature of our budgets. The next would be printing and binding. You know, this is one of the largest areas of our budget. It's just what we do. And official vote-by-mail ballots, countywide sample ballot mailings, and something very new. There was a court case last year that was brought to all SOEs. And to explain why the SOEs are included in this litigation, there was a ruling that came out of the 11th District Court of Appeals that said that you can no longer just sue the Secretary of State. In order for that ruling to be binding to the SOEs, you must include all 67 SOEs. So moving forward, anytime there's litigation around elections, we are going to be included in those lawsuits. There's nothing we can do about that because it has to be binding to us. We don't work for the Secretary of State, being an elected official, so that's why they had to do it that way. So the ruling was ADA compliance for those that have vision impairments. This is a $10,000 increase. We were very conservative on this. I can tell you that you can only use the approved vendors for this. There's 2 of them, and they have been lobbying me pretty heavily to go with them. And you're talking about an access of $50,000 to $70,000 to provide ballots to individuals that have a vision impairment. And we had to comply with the litigation was moved to a settlement where the SOEs had to come up with a viable plan, and the due date for that was March 31st of this year. We are now in compliance with that settlement agreement, and now we will not only have to provide a mechanism to request, but also a mechanism to deliver and return. We were able to find a vendor, approved vendor here in Florida, and they will be able to help us comply with this order, and that's about a $10,000 increase that, again, we have to comply with. But that's a natural increase to our budget that we can't avoid. For the upcoming 2022 general election, we're already at 136,000 vote-by-mail requests. This is the area of the line item where this is going to be affected.
right here. When you're talking about, that's unprecedented. We've never had that many requests ever, not even close. In 2018, we had 78,358 vote by mail requests. It's a pretty intense amount of work. You have to have a staff to open up all of those envelopes. You have to have a staff that, before they open them, that are going to process them and make sure that their signatures are matching. You have to have the machinery to tabulate all of these papers. I invite you to come to a canvassing board meeting, and you will see the movement of paper going around the room is quite impressive. But this is where this is you're going to see the major effect here.
Thank you, Chris.
Sure.
Before we go to the board, do we have any written requests to speak?
Kathleen Christie?
Please give us your name and address for the record when you come to the podium.
Good morning. My name is Catherine Christie. I live at 1942 Bridgewater Drive, Lake Mary, Florida 32746. And first of all, I want to thank all of you for all the hard work you have done. I've lived in Seminole County since 1987, and I've been astounded with the growth and how well the growth has been managed by the commission and also the constitutional officers. And I'm very happy to see Sheriff Lemus here as well. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Anderson. I appreciate your presentation, and I appreciate all the hard work that you've done. Last year, in 2020, was a very phenomenal, extraordinary election, and a lot of different circumstances that were evolving at that time, and I think that was handled very well. I personally voted early voting at the Lake Mary Library, and I stood in line for about 10 minutes. And I saw that there was the ballot box, the drop box ballot facility there, and it was well manned by an employee. So thank you for all of your foresight and dealing with that extraordinary election. I do have a couple comments, though.
Sure.
And I've been very interested in watching everything evolve over the last few months. I think of concern is just the question of facilities that we've been discussing, or you've been discussing with the board for several months. And I think two of the commissioners, Commissioner Herr and Commissioner Lockhart, brought up some good questions that probably should be addressed in this budget. And that would be the immediate needs regarding your facility and how that can be addressed properly. Because I've seen the pictures, I've seen the news reports, and I understand that, you are in a cramped situation. So it would appear that it would be good for your department to work with the Board of Commissioner and the county manager on trying to solve this immediately for the 2022 election and also for 2024. I'm a developer. I'm also a lawyer. I worked in real estate development for almost 30 years. So I understand the frustration of development and building a facility. But there are processes that have to take place, and it has to be done in a proper manner. One of the points I'd like to bring out is in the meeting in March 8th, one of the judges brought up an issue about traffic on the 5 points issue. There needs to be a traffic study. So that's part of the development process. So I would encourage you to work closer with the other departments in facilitating that development. And I understand what's happening with the mail-in ballot issue, and I think that's going to continue to be a favored methodology of voting by the voters of Florida, and particularly Seminole County. When you look at how the voters have voted historically, it's been basically half early voting, probably a little less than half same-day voting, and a little bit of the other quarter, I would say, of mail-in. Now we're at probably 1/5 of the voters voting for Election Day voting, 2/5 for early day, and then 2/5 for mail-in. And I noticed in your comment that you released with the Seminole County about processing these extra mail-in ballots. And you did a great job. It says you can process 22,000 mail-in ballots in 6 hours. So given that facility and the additional 30,000, we're probably talking about maybe another 6 or 8 hours of processing for those additional ballots. So that's a consideration, again, given that, what your spacing needs may be needed for current 2022 election as well as 2024.
Catherine, your time's expired. Can you?
Sorry,
summarize it?
thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Is there anyone else that'd like to speak? Is there anyone else in the audience that'd like to speak? Thank you. We'll now go to board discussion. Commissioners, Commissioner Zimbauer?
I have a question on Ms. Christie's comments. I want to make sure that I didn't miss something. Is our staff, Mr. Applegate, working with the SOE's office under the last direction on short-term needs?
His counsel and I have exchanged emails about setting up a meeting in the very near, hopefully in the next few days, actually, about talking about space needs.
And that's the short-term and long-term?
Yes.
Both?
Yes.
Just wanted to make sure. And that's happening from y'all's office?
Yes.
You agree with that?
Phil Capper, I'm General Counsel for the Supervisor of Elections. I've been in contact with Mr. Applegate, and we are in the process of scheduling time when we can get together and have those conversations.
Great, thank you. Mr. Anderson, one question. Can you tell us, give us an idea, what is involved with other charges and obligations?
So that is elections and the delivery of elections equipment. So
I'm sorry, delivery of what?
Delivery of elections equipment.
Okay.
So we use a third-party vendor. We have 24-foot trucks that come to our facility, and we load them all up with all the stuff you saw in that building, and it has to be deployed to our locations, either 8 early voting sites or our now 82 precincts. And that is being loaded by their employees and also delivered by their employees with us in tow.
And that wouldn't be under contracted services or assigned by your accounting process?
I would say that, yes.
Professional services?
Yes.
If you have some I'd like to see a line item on some of these. If you could get those to my office.
Sure,
I'd
absolutely.
sincerely appreciate it.
Commissioner, we'll be getting to all the commissioners' offices. If one asks for it, we all get a copy of it. Just for
Understood.
clarification.
And so just for clarification, if we're going to do it, it should just be the line item on all of it, because there is some confusion. I have the same questions written down back and forth between the chart of accounts and what was said. So it would be helpful to just have it all, because I think one answer is going to generate another question.
Yes, a line item would be helpful for me.
Absolutely.
Thank you. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Other commissioners? Commissioner Lockhart?
So, for our team, who on our team is working on the Evolve program that Mr. Anderson referenced earlier?
That would be the IT department, cybersecurity.
So I want to make sure our county managers someone knows that Evolve exists, who on our team is managing it, and getting updates of what that involves, what Evolve involves from our team, if that's, okay. And then this is another question for our team. With the cyclical nature of elections and budgets and seeing the up-down pattern that was a part of this presentation, I'm comparing it to the adopted budget spreadsheet that we were provided. And it's a little hard to compare because we're doing 17-18 on the supervisor elections, 18-19, kind of combining those. And ours is an annual adopted budget number, so none of the numbers match. Guide me and helping me to ferret that out, for one thing, and then when we should see the down. There's up, down, up, down, up, down. So when does the down come? Because I'm seeing, and again, I'm gonna look at our adopted budget numbers because I can't ferret out the combined years. Starting with 2018, it's 2.5 million, 2.8 million, 3.9 million. Then we dip down in 21 to 3.3. Then we're 3.8, 4.5. Tim, if you wouldn't mind helping me, and it doesn't have to be right this moment, certainly, but just know that that's something I'm going to need help deciphering, I believe.
I do notice some minor differences between the chart that he provided. I would assume that those would be our budgeted numbers. I don't know if you have other numbers in there. The chart I provided to you came from our financial system. Those are the documented amounts that we transferred to them. I do know they have grants that sometimes can get put in there, but I would expect that number to be the same as ours. I think the 2020 and 24, the presidential elections are typically the biggest, and then you normally see a down year after those. But the chart that he showed first, I think, indicates that he does have more elections than just the general election. So I think this chart shows the best in terms of the trend you would expect to see.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And you're going to see that dip take place after a general election, presidential general, because there is not another there's not another third election until the next presidential. So the decrease after that general election, presidential election, will be more significant than the decrease that we will see next year, because in next year's budget, we will have to budget to pay for the March presidential preference, which will be in, and I know this is confusing because I have to deal with this every day, that the 2023-2024 budget will have two elections in it, the presidential preference and the primary. Additionally, a portion of the cost in that presidential general election will also be in that budget because you have a deadline. The Supervisor of Elections Office is deadline driven. Overseas ballots have to go out 45 days prior to an election. Then you have your domestic ballots that have to go out, but they have to be prepared and sent to your printers way ahead of the October 1 fiscal year. So that's why it's a bit confusing as to where everything falls in that calendar year.
Mr. Capro, do you have something to say?
Well, I was just trying to clarify the question. I think what your question was is, you keep seeing numbers trend up, and you want to see when they might trend down. I don't think we can give you a direct answer other than to say, because of when your fiscal year starts, elections run
right into it.
Right. So you have the presidential preference, and then you have your primary. In this case, it was 19 into 20, and it will happen again in 23 into 24. That's your peak, right? And then you have a lower year after the year following because you only have one primary election. As far as overall costs going up, that's going to be a function of the fluctuation that's coming out of Tallahassee.
The reason I brought it up was because it was the very first slide, and so there was a premise that the presentation was based on, is that there's a cyclical nature. And so we're looking historically. I'm assuming you can predict the future from the past, so I'm asking when the next time is it'll go down, because I was assuming that was the purpose of showing the cyclical nature of up, down, and there would be a down at some point. So I understand, I think, what you're saying. The list maintenance, which is the unfunded mandate that you've identified out of this last legislative session, you said you've identified 2 new positions. Which one of those is going to handle the list maintenance unfunded mandate?
Deputy Chief.
The Deputy Chief will be handling the list maintenance role. Okay. And there was one other question. Same question as for the clerk. Number of vacant positions and lapsed salary dollars, and how many were there last year, and how many do you have this year, if we're returning that each year?
So last year we had 3. We were able to fill 1, so we're now at 2. We have 2 vacant positions. And I'm sorry, what was the?
Well, lapsed salary dollars.
So because we had a vacant position, that was what allowed us to be able to go ahead and make that adjustment to raise the pay from $12.65 to $15 an hour. We had some, we had room within that personnel line to make those adjustments. But right now, again, as I've said earlier, it's kind of difficult to increase our staffing as much as we need to because of our space needs. But when it comes to a voter services area, that's where most of the focus is coming from the legislator.
So I guess I need clarification then, because when I asked the question earlier of the clerk's lapsed salary dollars, those had to be returned to the board, and the answer that I got was that was the same for all constitutionals. So are we returning the lapsed salary dollars, or are we using those for pay increases for other positions?
I will have to check on the supervisor of elections, but, I'm sorry. I will have to check with the statute, but my understanding is particularly with fee officers, that comes back.
Okay.
Yes, and I'm sorry I didn't answer that. I apologize.
If we could just get clarification on the
Sure.
expectation for each individual constitutional officer, that would be helpful. If it's not the same across the board, that's fine. I just need to know what it is.
We'll get a report out
Okay,
to you.
thank you. That's all I have.
And
Commissioner Constantine?
Thank you very much. Mr. Anderson, as you recall, in 2020, your budget increase was $1.1 million, and some on this board were very critical of you, and some of us supported the fact that we understood that it was a budget, it was an election year, and you needed the money. And so this is kind of like on the back of what Commissioner Lockhart said. The next year, there was a $600,000 decrease the year after the election. So last year, when there was a $500,000 increase, I accepted it, another election year. So when you're talking about the delta, this year would seem to be the year that would be less. But on top of the $500,000 last year, there's another $700,000 increase this year. So I guess it's not the same question, it's just that, the cyclical nature that you have indicated doesn't seem to be occurring this year. It's up on election years, down on non-election years. This year, 22, is an election year state. Next year is not. But we're looking at a $700,000 increase next year. So I just wanted to, is there an explanation for that?
increase in we are adding 2 positions, and also, remember, we have an exorbitant amount of vote-by-mail ballots now. You went from, in 2016, if you're going to compare presidential to presidential, 86,000 vote-by-mail ballots in a presidential. We're at 136,000. $2.40. Paper costs have gone up. It costs $580,000 just to do that. So if you look, the math is right there, that is where your increases are coming from.
But
Now,
would that be in an election year, Mr.
but
Anderson?
remember, in your election years, you are paying, because of the fiscal year and the way elections fall, you're going to have to pay for a lot of those things out of other budgets because you have that deadline that you have to meet. If I'm responsible for mailing out UOCAVA and vote-by-mail ballots 40 to 45 days prior to the general election, that is going to have, that cost has to be paid, and our vendors will not allow us to move it into another fiscal. They're going to want their pay up front. Now, to
So
answer...
help me out here, please. I'm sorry,
Sure.
I didn't mean to interrupt. Did you want to finish, please?
Yes.
Okay.
And to answer Commissioner Lockhart's question, we've returned $232,000 back to the budget, or back to the county in our last budget. That would be 2020, 2021. We obviously don't know what it will be this year. We have consistently returned back anywhere from about $150,000 to $200,000 back to the county. And that projection, or that chart that I provided, shows you that our budget has been very consistent in how we spend our funds and return them. Now, Commissioner Constantine, to explain...
So let me I want, let's get back to the question. So,
Sure.
So we want to get on the timeline. And I'm not, again, I don't want to talk about specifics in the budget. I just look at totals.
Right.
The big picture. So when you talk about timeline, 22, 23 ends, this one coming up ends in October 1.
Correct.
So it's September 30th of 23. Your ballots don't go out for the 24 election in September of 23, do they? Because you're talking about mail ballots. This year, I understand that you have to have mail ballots out, and this that you had a $500,000 increase ends in September 30th this year. So I know you have to put out the ballots. I get that.
Right.
Next year, 22-23, you're looking at September 30th of '23. Mail-in ballot, and maybe this, I want the answer, and so I see you're smiling, Phil, so maybe you've got, or whatever kind of smile you have, that's as best as you got. Well, you're frowning, but there's a little crease. I know, we're having fun, please. But the 23 ballots go out, I mean, the 24 ballots don't go out by September 30th, nor do we buy the ballots, so explain to this for me.
Commissioner, I think the confusion is stemming from the fact that this year's budget ends September 30th, 2022. We still have an election in November of 2022, so those general ballots have to go out from somewhere, and that comes out of next year's budget.
But you're buying them all in this fiscal year. You're buying them all the printing.
Yes. So we will purchase, we will have to purchase those ballots, because remember, we're not the only SOE that is at that vendor, working with that vendor. Our vendor right now has about 22 SOEs, and we try to typically get our information there pretty quickly. Now remember, we can't wait. Well, we have to wait until after qualifying is done before we can actually send over the artwork, right? The qualifying doesn't happen until the third week of June. So now you're in the third week of June, then we have to prepare the ballots, make sure that they're correct, they're proofread, and make sure that the English, the Spanish is correct. It's quite a tedious process. You're talking about 8 or 9 checks, and then I probably want to check once more, because once you mail those out, there is no bringing them back. They're out. So we want to make sure that they're correct, and once we do that, then we will send them to our vendor, who is going to require us to pay for that up front, and that is going to have to occur in this general
That's what the commissioner is trying to get at.
Yes.
That's being paid for in the 22 budget, not the 23 budget.
Correct.
Okay, this is the 22 budget, this is the 23 budget.
Understood.
I'm not 100% sure that the general election ballots will be paid out of the 22 budget rather than the 22-23 budget.
But he just said they're all getting paid.
No, let me clarify. What you're seeing is a decrease, right? I said that there's a 34.9% decrease because there are a couple of things that we won't have to do in this particular budget that we're looking at. The mail ballots will be covered, right? However, what you're going to look at is we're hiring our election worker staff. That is another large portion. Those are costs that will occur in the 2022-2023 budget. So there are things that occur in this budget year that are in preparation for the general election, and then there are things that occur in the general election budget, which is the 2022-2023 budget, that will have to be paid for out of this budget.
You know what may help us, and I'm not trying to insinuate that we may not, maybe some confusion can help us. Can we get a timeline of when things get paid and which budget year things come out of? Because
Sure.
I think that we're
We have that now. I can actually get that to you.
If you can get it to us, that'd be great.
Absolutely.
Because I'm having the same question where a lot of the numbers that you're talking about for the election of 2022 is being paid for in 2022, not 2023. And this is a 2023 budget. So if we can get a timeline between your office and our staff to figure that out, it'd be clear.
Absolutely.
Okay.
If I can still.
You can continue, and then we'll go on to the next.
The other question that I had is you were out there in the audience, and so was Mr. Capra, listening to the question that I had of the other constitutionals. Did you want to comment on that?
I did hear that, and I am open to those discussions. And I also actually gave some thought to this as well. And I thought, as our constitutionals, as we return funds back to the county, if you look at our capital outlay, it's at $132,000, and that's for a DS-200 and another cybersecurity server to protect our network. That's small pennies compared to the overall general election budget. However, my question has been to my team is, what happens to those funds that have essentially been earmarked for us, but we have given back to the county? And I actually had a conversation with Commissioner Zimbauer about this and saying, why don't we earmark what is given back to the county for that constitutional to use for capital outlay? And that reduces what capital outlay looks like in the future budgets. So now the money's already been approved, the public is been included in those conversations, and now we're essentially using funds that have already been earmarked for said constitutional that now that constitutional can use. And also, too, you can put a cap on it as a board and say, well, if you're going to make purchases more than this amount, then it may require some approval. But when you have those funds that are essentially going back, that have already been given, if I would have had the access to those funds, you wouldn't even see a capital outlay in my budget. It wouldn't even be there. That's
Anderson,
100.
I think
Right
that's
now-
the reason why we wouldn't do that.
Well, but you would already have, you would already see those things.
Mr. Anderson, that's a question from one commissioner. We have not vetted that out because we have not
Sure.
had this conversation
Yeah.
amongst
But
ourselves.
as I respond to...
Before we go to the constitutional officers to understand where they sit, we would have to vet that out ourselves. We have not
Absolutely.
done that.
Absolutely.
This is the first time I've been talking about it, and I've not spoken to anyone yet.
But to answer Commissioner
Understand.
Constantine's answer, I'm open to that discussion for sure.
Thank you. Commissioner Zimbauer.
Question on the historic $200,000 being returned. I just want to point out, you're asking for a $296,000 increase. You anticipate you'll have $200,000 to return?
Our increase, where is that number coming from, Commissioner?
$296,000 increase for the fiscal year '23 is the variance from '22.
Commissioner, the SOE's increase is 660. The report you're looking at.
I'm sorry, I'm down one line.
Yep.
600, almost $700,000.
So the question is, do you anticipate $200,000 coming back?
I can take a look at our expenditures, and I can provide that information to you.
And so the next question I have with that thought process is, if this board decides not to approve the request, and instead of approving the full request, allowing you to come back at a later time for a amendment, is that something you feel is workable? And we've done this with the SOE in the past as well.
Say that one more time, Commissioner.
If we decide not to approve your request on the full budgetary request, and we just take a wait and see what happens attitude, where you can come back mid-year and ask for additional funding for specific items, is that something that would work for you?
You would completely jeopardize the election if you did that.
Okay?
I'm just, because we have deadlines. Now, keep in mind, we have to pay for early voting. We have to pay for those election workers for those general election cycles. We are completely deadline-driven. Asking me to come back when I have to send this stuff to printers to get printed, and the time that it takes to do are we talking about a BAR? Coming back and doing that request, by the time we get in front of you, now you're going to jeopardize the delivery of vote-by-mail ballots, and we may not be within our statutory compliance. So I would caution the board in taking that type of approach with the elections office. That's a dangerous move to make, and without actually looking at the numbers and understanding exactly what we're talking about here. I would first need to see what that looks like before we move forward.
Mr. Zimbauer, anything else?
No, I'll just...
Commissioner Herr?
I just want to close out with a for the record. I don't think you were suggesting that you would hold back on the printing budget. I think it was other areas within the budget, so it wouldn't jeopardize the election. I just want to get on the record that none of us want to jeopardize the election by holding back the printing cycles.
Correct. Thank you, Commissioner. My request stands for a line item, and I also would like a spreadsheet for the last fiscal year.
Sure.
Commissioner Herr?
I think the other thing that we probably also need, and I think we need this from Tim, is what's returned every year. So different from what was previously stated with regard to fees, this is now a return from being under budget for all offices. I just want to point to my fellow commissioners to the chart that's in the front of our book that I think you're all looking at. And this does show the cycle. It shows the cycle. In 16, it was an 18% increase. In 7, so that's a presidential. In 17, it was a 9.3% decrease. In 18, it was a 1.7% decrease. And then in 19, it was an 11.9. Plus, then it went to a 30 9% plus, then it went down by 14, then it went up by 15. So I think what would be helpful to us, Tim, would also to be able to see, because this is now a 4-year cycle. We only have 2 on the page. Maybe we should go back and look further. And I do appreciate the fact, before it has to be said, that the mail-in ballots have changed. I understand that. But that new norm has been created, and it's going to continue to slide up, but it's not peaking up every year. So we should see a different impact to numbers. I would also point out that if I look at a 5-year average, this budget is increasing an average of 13% per year as well, and it truly is not sustainable. I do want to go back to your slide with regard to staffing levels. The one with the circles above it. And I can't remember what the name was, but there was a funny name used this morning for those of us that like math, and I took it as a compliment.
Mathlete.
Yeah, mathlete. I've not been elite of anything ever, so now I'm taking it. Ring the bell. So if I look at the basis for comparison here, there are voter numbers that go down into the 100,000s, which I don't think is a comparison to a 300,000 level voter number. I think that argument was made loud and clear with the space planning. So if I only take those above 200,000, I have 5 to compare to. And if I do that math, I come up with a 16,781 with like size, which puts us at 10% off of the staffing, not wildly off on staffing. So just know that that's a different way to look at this that would at least be my way of looking at it. You're currently sitting at 17 employees with 3 openings.
Correct.
So you're sitting at 20. But this only says 18. So the denominator's not right.
We're looking at what we currently had when this chart was made. We actually had an employee resign and move to the school board.
But are you looking at what you have or what your openings are?
Well, like I said, it's also been very difficult to fill those openings.
Understand and appreciate it, but we need that number to be a level number across the page. So this chart needs some work before I think we appreciate whether or not what the staffing level needs to be. We want to get to the right number, but we need to understand the math behind it to make sure it's validated.
Understood.
And then I would go to the chart of accounts and point out that there are three areas that decreased. One is in communication, that was $2,000. One is in transportation with a parentheses of postage, which I won't confess to understand. But that statement was that the mailer was covered in this budget year, so it doesn't need to be in next budget year, which gets to the question you guys asked. That's $101,000. And then there's a supply decrease. There's no other decreases here. I think the chart of accounts will help us understand that better because it's hard to roll this up into these line items and understand it. So the chart of account may clarify a bunch of that stuff,
Understood.
along with your timeline for the mailers.
Gotcha.
And that's it. Thank you.
Commissioner Lockhart.
Same chart, rental and leases. Is that your space at the airport?
No. The lease for the airport is covered under the county budget.
And is there a reason why we don't have it in the constitutional officer's budget?
Our facilities department manages all of the leases for the constitutional officers that we are responsible for.
Okay. Got it.
Any other comments?
Nope.
Thank you very much, Mr. Anderson.
Thank you.
We're going to take a 5-minute recess before we go to the sheriff's office. We can all take our seats. We can continue. I first want to publicly acknowledge and thank the Sheriff, Dennis Lima. We are approaching the lunch hour, and the sheriff approached me and agreed to go in the afternoon, so I wanted to thank the sheriff and his staff for doing that. Dennis, thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Talk about being a team player.
Sorry to keep you here.
Has always been. By doing that, we're able to go to the health department, and we'll hear from the sheriff in the afternoon. So right now, we're going to go to the health department. Donna Walsh. Donna?
Thank you so much, and I, too, that the Health Department would like to thank the Sheriff for his generous offer to allow us to go first. I just feel that our presentation and budget is far less than his phenomenal presentation. So, Chairman, thank you so much. Commissioners, staff, thank you for this opportunity to discuss our budget. The good news is that we are in a season of recovery and renewal. We've been through a rough couple years, all of us in the community, and we're just staying steady. And so steady, if you just look through the presentation, looking at the actuals from 21-22 to 22-23, and let me do that for you. You can see that the total is about the same. Just to explain our budget cycle every year, we're a state budget cycle which initiates July 1st, ends June 30th. So we are in the last weeks of getting our budget wrapped up, which means that we have still some reconciliations to do. We're waiting on Schedule C dollars from the state that come down for federally funded and state-funded programs. Most of those have come in and built into our budget module, but you'll see that this figure, $9.8 million, just under a $10 million budget, is subject to change in the next couple weeks. It'll be around that figure, however. So the take-home message, however, is that it's going to be pretty steady, pretty level funded. This is just a breakdown pie chart of where our funding comes from. Just to give you a synopsis there, about 63% of our budget comes from state funds, and some of those state funds include federally funded programs such as WIC, Women, Infant, Children's Program, family planning, STD, HIV, and immunizations. About 22% of our budget comes from local fees. We do charge a nominal fee for some services we provide. However, we never withhold services for inability to pay. And so, those fees do support our budget. And then 15% comes from local contributions, contracts, and grants, which the county is generous enough to support the health department as we try to provide services for those underserved, underinsured in our community. So you'll see the breakdown there. And the majority of our budget is just as many, about 80-85% for staff salaries and benefits. So where are we at with our staffing? Well, we've been very judicious during this COVID response period. The budgets that I'm showing you here does not include the federally funded COVID budget. If you all would like more information on that, I can certainly break that down for you. We do have separate budgeting for our COVID team, which did expand to about 100 staff members during the surges. Folks have found other opportunities, and either we have been able to hire them within our agency when vacancies come open, or they've found other opportunities, and we've been a nice training ground to build their resumes. So we did receive at the beginning of January 2021 about $9.6 million to cover our COVID response. We are sitting at about $6.7 million balance, which is to last us through July 2024. And we currently have about 50 staff members, 32 that work every day in our case investigations, contact tracing, immunization efforts, as well as testing. And then we have about 18 in a pool. Whenever we do expand during surges, our services, then we pull on those individuals to come and assist. So we expect that those funds will stay available to us so that we can continue to properly respond to the COVID needs during the next couple years. You see here our budget comparison side by side. You'll see in 2021, as we were just responding to COVID, we did dip because we were using our cash balance to fund our response. So that did hit our cash balance until those federal dollars came in to help us. And then the state did add to our cash balance to offset that deficiency that we had when the COVID response initially occurred. And then you see 2022, 2023 projection there. We are required by state mandate, Florida statute, to stay between 3% and 8% cash balance. And so we are going to be right about in there. So we're continuing to monitor that closely, and we expect that might go up just a little bit as we finish our budget year. So county contributions, we could not have responded without the county support. I sing your praises wherever I talk in circles with my colleagues and so forth. We are very blessed here in Seminole County, and I want to thank you all for your continued support, not only during the COVID response, but for the other programs we've been able to initiate and expand that are not traditionally funded. We do continuously seek grant opportunities. We really try not to ask for monies unless we really can't find any other revenue sources to continue our services. So our level funding from the county is around $808,000 annually. Thank you for that, and that's been pre-existing for many, many years. About $40,000 offsets our cost for our diabetes prevention and self-management programs, about $20,000 for our dental sealant services, and $100,000 for our mobile health services, which I will go into in more detail in the next few slides, and $81,000 for our teen outreach program, positive youth development programs that continue. As you all are aware, during the COVID response, many of our services did decline in number, but we are, as I mentioned, in recovery and renewal. We're starting to see people come back for services, and we're encouraged by folks actually coming to seek the services that we traditionally offer. What is not noted here, and I do want to emphasize, because every year I know, Commissioner, you ask me, what are in-kind services? So we are very grateful that the county supports us in all ways at our locations, our Airport Boulevard location, Castleberry, and the new SGTV location for our environmental health services, not only paying for our lease, but also the upkeep of those locations, facilities, utilities, and groundskeeping. And that estimate is about $1.2 million plus. So thank you so much for the in-kind services as well. So this is just an example of the grants that we seek to support. Our Ryan White HIV grant, we just applied. We're in a 3-year cycle on that. And so we should be hearing this month whether or not we receive that. I really have no need to believe that we won't receive those dollars. We've been receiving Ryan White to treat our HIV/AIDS clients for over 20 years in Seminole County. So that should continue on, and that's through the EMA in Orlando. Several counties apply for those grants in Central Florida. The project scores through Orlando Health Community Benefits. We do apply for the hospital community benefits grants, and pretty much every year we do receive those, and so those are very helpful as well. But basically, they're seed grants. They start your programs and initiatives, and then you look at sustainability models to continue them. So this particular one is to help individuals with their tax preparers, as they prepare their taxes for free. And so our staff member community health worker assists clients in seeking that service. Fall prevention, we just were notified that we are going to be recipients of the fall prevention grant, and that'll carry over into next year. And so we do have an individual who, actually a CNA, who has experience in educating long-term care facilities, nursing homes and such, and she has hit the ground running with education and fall prevention for their residents. Breast and cervical early detection program, that program we have long-standing, but what we did is expand to the Hispanic population. So we were able to acquire some additional dollars in order to do that, and not only the Hispanic population, but a lower age group than what the federal grant allows. And so we're now at 40 years of age and older to provide free mammograms and also any of the services that are needed if cancer is detected. So that's through a combination of federal and now a hospital grant. Kresge Foundation, this was a grant during the COVID response to help with health equity. And so we are continuing those efforts as COVID continues to make sure that everyone has equal opportunity to testing, treatment, and so forth, anything related to COVID vaccination. we have a team doing that. Our overdose prevention program through NACHO, this is going to be a carryover to next year. We're hopeful. We work very closely with the Sheriff's Office, their SCORE team, and in fact, they just had a meeting this morning, case management meeting, in which their team responds initially. Our community paramedic goes on home visits afterward to reinforce what services are available to recovery for those individuals and families, and also assesses the other social determinants of health or health needs within the household and connects people to services. So that partnership is working out beautifully as we're trying to get people into care. And then, of course, the bottom line item there is Seminole County government supporting us in our integrated system of care, as you saw on the previous slide, diabetes prevention, education, dental sealant, and teen outreach program. As I mentioned, some of these will be carried over to the 2022-2023 fiscal year, but we're waiting for the final word on how much we can carry over. So that's why you see a drop there currently. We do have another grant, the SNAP Ed grant, that the state acquired several years ago. We've been beneficiaries of that for not only adults, but for youth. And those, we just learned that the state will not be reapplying for those SNAP Ed grants. Therefore, our grant will end the end of September, the federal fiscal year. So you'll see a line item here. Really, the only additional dollars we are asking from the county to support our continued nutritional education, because it's shown to be very valuable, is $70,000 for the nutritional educator. So you'll see that in green there, that line item. And I can answer more questions to that if you guys have questions later. This is just an overview of some of our services. In 2020-2021 fiscal year, we saw almost 34, or provided almost 34,000 services. As schools reopened, you see this fiscal year, we're at 29,000, just over, services provided in our school health service program. So as I mentioned, we did see a dip during COVID, but we are in recovery here. Same thing for our WIC program. Most of WIC was provided virtually during COVID. That was a federal mandate. They are starting to see individuals now in person, but those services did dip slightly from 89,000 to a little over 83,000 this fiscal year. In our environmental health services, we are also seeing a slight decrease, well, more than a slight, almost 3,900 services last year compared to 2,600 this year. This is one of the areas that essential services that we are struggling with. I know in state government as well as local, recruitment and retainment has been an issue for highly skilled positions. And this, we're down about 3 to 5 staff members. We're struggling to recruit. And fortunately, we've been able to receive mutual aid from surrounding counties that have been able to send specialists in to help us with inspections. Also from the state, Tallahassee, their program office has actually sent individuals down to assist us as we're trying to recruit to rebuild this particular program. And you'll see just a glimpse of our community integrated mobile health services. Where you see the peaks here, were primarily, this team made close to 3,000 visits to provide testing and vaccine during the COVID response in coordination with the county first responders. They were very helpful to us in going out and helping us with testing and vaccine. We're still continuing that today. So those peaks were during the surges when there was more of a need and when we had pods set up for vaccine and testing. But we do continue community integrated mobile health services. So in the next couple of slides, you will see the program expansions, what your county dollars are supporting. So we not only have staff here that are community paramedics, but we have health educators, community health workers, and nurses that work this program, and now a nutritional educator that will be joining this program. In the next few slides, you'll get more details here into each of these. So the pediatric asthma program, the funding source for that happens to be Florida Department of Health grant. So we do have a community health worker that administers that particular program, and you'll see here how many clients served in the last fiscal year, the age groups from 5 to 18, essentially getting referrals from doctors' offices and schools in order to provide parents with education on how to manage the asthma with their children. And there's many incentives there as well, like air filters for the home, and there's many that the federal government through our state health office provide in this particular program. Cardiovascular and chronic obstructive pulmonary disease program. Again, this is funded through the Florida Department of Health grant. We do have a full-time emergency medical technician and a part-time paramedic from the Health Council who assist us with this particular program, and essentially helping folks to manage their chronic illness related to cardiovascular and COPD in the home in coordination with their healthcare providers. General community outreach that you'll see here, we do have a standing about 16 different sites that are mobile unit visits, and we plan to expand on that as we're able to increase staffing here. But these are our underserved communities that the rescue mission, for instance, Shepherd's Hope, that we coordinate our hepatitis prevention program with Shepherd's Hope, Community Church of God in Geneva, United Medical and Social Services, Midway Safe Harbor. These are just some examples. Bueno Pharmacy Picnic Project, Remington Inn, now known as Uptown Inn and Suites, Iglesia Nueva Vida, Shepherd's Hope, I mentioned, Pathways to Care, Prayer for Sanford, and recently Open Your Heart to Hope Food Pantry. I just want to mention that during the COVID response, the county helped us with their COVID dollars to purchase a trailer that's, it's a clinic on wheels, basically, and that has been extremely helpful in testing and vaccination during this event, which we have now transitioned to support our Community Integrated Mobile Health Service team.
And Donna, it's not lost on me that as you're talking about health, we're passing chocolate.
I know.
Exactly. Table. So my apologies for
I'm not seeing this.
Wrapping.
No. Yeah, there's got to be peanuts in there somewhere.
There
protein.
Are, yes.
Yeah.
I was going to ask if she found it ironic as she's talking about health, we're passing chocolate and candy around.
Hey, I completely understand. I'm a fan of comfort food, okay? So you'll see here in our community outreach some of the screenings that we perform: blood pressure, pre-diabetes, BMIs, HIV, STDs, family planning referrals, food distribution, adult vaccinations. This team also delivered food to people's homes during the COVID response who were isolated and in quarantine that could not get out, to purchase groceries and such. We also give away hand sanitizer, raincoat, socks, washable cloths, hygiene kits, packs of masks, and other items that may be needed by individuals. This is the overdose prevention program, the one I mentioned, that's funded by a federal grant through NACCHO, National Association of County and City Health Officials. This grant is going to end this fiscal year. They may allow us to carry over the unspent funds through next fiscal year, which we're hopeful for, because regardless of the funding, we want to continue our partnership with the Sheriff's Office. It seems to be very valuable for those we're serving. And so here we have a program coordinator, full-time, an evaluator who is an epidemiologist who does the data analysis and reporting for us, as well as she collates that, right? Then we have the epidemiologist who actually does the analysis, and our health educator consultant with this particular program. Oops. Sometimes this wants to work and sometimes it doesn't. And then with the nutrition initiatives, you'll see here, currently we are in designated food desert areas: Midway Safe Harbor, Goldsboro Elementary School. We're in 7 different daycares providing this service. Our educator used to be a teacher in school, and so she's doing a phenomenal job. She even purchased a doll that has all the organs in it, and it's quite creative. But she's doing a phenomenal job, and we do have further information on this program if you would like for us to send that at a later point in time to review. But essentially, it's to provide education so that we can prevent those chronic illnesses from ever occurring: obesity, heart disease, diabetes. And we are, prioritizing right now our Title I schools as best we can, and then look to expand. Our diabetes prevention program includes diabetes self-management as well as diabetes prevention. And you'll see here, this has been now in place for a couple of years. As I mentioned before, we were able to add an educator, a community health worker, to reach out to our Hispanic population as well. Recruitment and retainment has been a challenge with this particular program too, and we are in the process of recruiting additional folks. Fall prevention, as I mentioned, was recently added, and this is through Orlando Health Grant. And then through the Community Integrated Mobile Health Services funding that the county provides, that does assist with supporting this particular program as well, because the $25,000 does not fully fund one person. So the county's funds also support this. And so you see a glimpse, a couple pictures here of, our community engagement. I say this many times, is the health department cannot stand alone to provide for our community. We have in total about 165 full-time staff and OPS staff. And so with those staffs, I know that we, before COVID, went down 100 staff members through 2 workforce reductions, and we learned very quickly that partnerships were essential in order for us to continue to provide the services that our community needs. And so we continue building those bridges, those partnerships, and strengthening those. And COVID, in my opinion, just strengthened them even further and opened up more opportunities. So with that, I would just like to show a short video. It's less than 5 minutes. And this is just to capture our activities during National Public Health Week and your support there as well as we venture into recovery and renewal.
Planning Committee is excited to share an official recap of the 2022 National Public Health Week at the Florida Department of Health in Seminole County. On Monday, for our Cultural Competency Breaking Down Systemic Barriers activity, we began a great week with a lunch and learn reflective discussion of the film A Place at the Table, moderated by Venice White. A Place at the Table sheds light on the pressing and prolonged issue of insecurity in America and the ways in which a national public health crisis affects families very differently. It was another reminder of how important it is that as public health professionals, our work includes community voice at every step. On Tuesday, we celebrated our very own public health workforce that is so essential to our community with a live food demonstration from Ebony Nutrition's Executive Director, Glenn Providence. Mr. Providence provided both natural ice cream and non-dairy flavors for our staff to sample, and it was indeed a treat. On Wednesday, we continued our commitment to redefine health as a community by focusing on mental wellness. DOH staff were able to participate in a rock and sand reflection activity with Heather Haskett, conscious coloring, a mind mapping journal activity with Holly Mohammed, as well as receive information about the Employee Assistance Program, True Health, and other evidence-based wellness and mindfulness strategies. A reflection room was also offered all week for staff to take a breather to unwind, take in some essential oils, and enjoy a moment of relaxation before returning to their day of tasks and priorities. Special thanks goes out to our voice talent of staff who kicked off each day of the week with words of guided inspiration for us. You guessed it, you heard the soothing and calming sounds of Alicia Burke, Corey Moss, James Witherspoon, Iniabel Schmelti Goita, and Gloria Rinevera. Major thanks go out to Pranav Mehta for your videography, producer, and film editing contributions this entire week. On Thursday, we motivated our staff to join us in the World Health Day Challenge, A Healthy Bite is a Human Right, for our very first DOH Chopped. 7 DOH contestants joined the challenge to take a secret ingredient from our public health garden and transform it into a creative, healthy, and tasty dish. This event was commentated by Jonathan Hunt, and the winner was determined by our panel of judges, Donna Walsh, Anna Scuteri, Sarah Wright, and our master gardener, Rufus Boykin. After tough deliberation, Chef Alice Gibson's collard greens, cornbread, and chow chow sauce won her the Golden Spatula and first place prize. Chef James, with his creative deconstructed cabbage roll casserole, was a second place crowd favorite. Additional participants included Chef Zinat Rahman, Chef Harana Mortimer, Chef Colleen Lewis, Chef Joycelyn Montgomery, and Chef Tiffany Johnson, who all did an exceptional job with their healthy, hearty dishes. We concluded Thursday with a competitive game of Healthy Kahoot designed by our in-house nutritionist, Judy Swayatas and Catherine Diaz. Sakia Lynn Johnson topped the day off as our Healthy Kahoot winner, and our second place winner was Haranda Mortimer. To conclude a great week, on Friday, our executive leadership team hosted an open house and wellness tour featuring our future install wellness equipment, our Innovation Lab official charter signing reveal, and our Wellness Corner. Haggerty High School's National Art Honor Society joined us to create a vibrant chalk art display on our wellness trail. County officials and DOH staff attended and then joined us for a moving and lively message on the power of belief by world-renowned speaker and organizational coach, Dr. Keita Joy. We then ended an amazing week of events with some Zen therapy, dog therapy. Congratulations to our 2022 National Public Health Week Planning Committee on a job well done. We are also excited to see what this committee executes next year.
If that doesn't make you hungry, I don't know. Thank you, Commissioner Herb.
The National Public Health Week
I do want to mention, as I was viewing that, I do want to note that the county has supported us in several major projects this year as well during the COVID response. As was mentioned there, the walking trail, the sidewalk that was installed on our campus for both our employees and visitors, as well as the wellness equipment. It is almost complete for both youth and adults. The mobile clinic trailer I mentioned, and the parking lot resurfaced. So thank you so much for all of that this year. And I know next year the generator is in, but we're waiting for the installer. So the generator installation and landscaping to replace some of the downed trees, you all are going to support us again next year for that on the campus. So thank you again. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna. Before we go to the board, is there any written requests? Anyone in the audience would like to speak to this issue? We'll go to the board for comments. I'll start with Commissioner Lockhart.
I'll just commend you and your team for the work that you do every year, day in and day out. Environmental services is a concern. You and I have talked about it. Our constituents have questions regularly about why things are slow, and it is what it is not an acceptable answer, but I think what we're hearing is until we can recruit and retain more employees, it's the circumstance that we're in. And I know you mentioned that you're bringing in backup from outside of the area. If there is anything that you think our team can do to assist, I think we do so many things that are woven together and relate to one another, but that division in particular is they're wounded, right? And that it impacts so much of what our citizens are trying to do with getting septics approved and getting all of it's just sort of like there's a little bit of a juggernaut there. So anything that you think that we might be able to help with, I think would be helpful.
Thank you for that. Thank you. And we're in constant communication, as we do get the complaints and so forth, but we have been able to contract service, if you will, acquire a couple contractors to help us with the septic in particular, to stay up with those inspections. And so to date, in that particular program, we are up to date, believe it or not, through the contract services. And it's a model that the rest of the state is looking to duplicate because we don't stand alone here in Seminole. There are many counties who are requesting mutual aid from other counties, and we're all in the same position, unfortunately. We don't have staff to lend out. And so the contract services, we have to pay a bit more for that, but we're willing to do that in order to meet the community's needs.
Thank you, Donna. Commissioner Constantine.
First of all, thank you, Donna, to you and your staff. You guys did an incredible job during this pandemic. We really appreciate everything that you've done for this community. Let me go back to what about this environmental services, if we can, for a minute, because a lot of people don't understand that's part of your responsibility. But I did note the septic permits were by far the largest percentage that you do. Are those, when you say inspections, that's a clarification of inspections of people that are asking for additions to their homes, that you have to inspect their septic tanks? Or are there other reasons you inspect the septic tanks?
Sure. Well, as you all have seen, building has increased, right, on the other end of COVID. And so new systems. So, and then if they are in the BMAP areas, Wekiva Basin areas, then they have to adhere to, if they're new, adhere to the nitrogen reducing system. So that's, creates another element. added onto that, Department of Environmental Protection is the regulatory authority now over septic systems, but they contracted back with the Health Department for 5 years during the transition. So our folks are still responsible for the inspections and permitting. It does include additions as well as new systems and any repairs, so all of that.
And that's what I wanted to say. The Department of Environmental Protection now has responsibility over that, but they have contracted back with you for the next 5 years?
Yes.
Or now 4 years?
4
if you
years
will?
going.
So are they paying you for that, or, are they giving you any additional money?
No additional funding. In fact, they probably took some away because some of the responsibility now is, they're the authority. So for instance, if there is a variance request, then that goes through the DEP now. If there is a fine of any sort, that now goes through DEP. Our role at the Health Department is to inspect and permit along with the county. Of course, we work with county permitting as well on these properties. But we're in constant communications with DEP if there's any issues at all. And, they help us through that process now that they're the regulatory authority.
How many of these 884 are new and how many are inspected? Do you have that?
I don't have that with me, but I can get that for you.
I'd appreciate it.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
Mrs. Zimbauer?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Donna, and your staff. The unsung heroes in our community that have done so much in the last couple of years, you are truly very special. It takes special people to do these things in our community, and I know that many in our community are very thankful. I as well want to recognize your ability to recognize and serve those less fortunate in our community. So thank you all very much for that. I appreciate it.
Commissioner Herr?
Yep. So ditto on all the thank yous and just some practical questions. With regard to the grants, I noticed that Orlando Health is coming in, but HCA and Advent are not. So I would just offer you, if there's any opportunity to tag team there, I'd be happy to help.
Sure. Well, I sit on Advent's board for community benefits, and so, I'll have to excuse myself in the event that we apply. We have not applied through them yet, but have considered an application through them. And actually, I say that, the community, when we first initiated community paramedicine, but that was a grant through Advent. And the Health Council was the recipient of that grant. Primarily, I suggested that they be the recipient because of the procurement processes through the state government. It was just easier to get it through a health council than through the health department, and we wanted it to be successful. So Advent has done their part to start. Now, HCA is not required to have community benefits. They're a great partner, but they technically are a for-profit versus a non-for-profit. Therefore, they are not required to have a community benefits program as the other two hospital systems.
But they are required to pay taxes as the...
Well, that's true. Yes, right.
Yeah.
I think Orlando Health is a for-profit as well.
Oh, okay.
The diabetes prevention program, I
Yes.
think that's just singly one of the most costly phenomena that we have going on just because of volume, not because it's high cost, but because of volume and because of the comorbidities. And I'm not joking. I actually would love to have whatever material you have on that to hand out to this board and within our organization
We
as
can
we
do that.
continue to eat candy.
Yes.
Because I can't say no to the candy dish, but maybe I should be paying better attention to that.
You saw the healthy options in the video, right?
I did see the healthy options in the video. None of those seemed attractive to me.
Oh, no.
Maybe if I read, they will become attractive to me.
They were delicious.
But thank you for everything you do. And it was a great week for your team.
Thank you. Thank you for that. We have to celebrate. The team's been through a lot, and, again, it takes a village, and I can't thank our community enough for helping to support during this really trying time. I also did not mention the relationship, the partnership we have with the tax collector's office, too. We were able to, in 4 of their offices, provide vital statistics birth certificates, and that's proven to be a very valuable service as well to our community. We're looking at perhaps expanding to our Castleberry office this next fiscal year, the vital statistics services, and maybe even more tax collector's offices. So we are looking at that as a possibility.
Thank you. Mr. Applegate?
You all beat me to it, and rightly so, but I also want to say that, and even when I was county attorney, working with Donna over the years, the great thing about Donna, is her passion and how much she appreciates the teamwork. And I will never forget the stand down, and I can't wait for the next one, hopefully, with COVID and everything.
yes.
But to see what Donna and her staff does, what they all do during the stand down to help the veterans, just remarkable. So, and thank you for all the help you gave my office during COVID.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Applegate. Don, I'm not going to repeat everything that everyone said, just still be here. You all do a phenomenal job, and I'll leave it at that. So thank you very much. We are going to go into recess for lunch. We'll be back at 1:15 if there's no objections. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, Sheriff, again. Oh, he's gone.
He's the Lord.
Your audience dwindled considerably.
I see that. Okay.